Then I will start loving you. Just stepping through a door erased the distance of several days of interstellar travel, which made Rampo click her tongue in wonder. Master Yumao's Nintech is truly astonishing. Bai Luan closed the anywhere door and shrugged. It's nothing. With Rampo leading, Bai Luan and 8882 followed toward Botio's hideout to plan their next move. As they walked, 882 explained his designation and Beta Star's naming history to Rampo. I see, Rampo said, so your name has a story. Bai Luan smiled, but they should probably stop naming people with production numbers. 8 and 82 cocked his head in curiosity. Why? That method is very convenient, isn't it? This is for future Beta Star people to consider, Bai Luan replied. The numbers will only get longer. Right now you use the first 3 digits, but eventually those abbreviations will overlap. You'll keep extending them to tell people apart until the whole point of an abbreviation is lost. You can keep calling yourself 882, he added, but future folks won't introduce themselves by reciting 40 or 50 digits, will they? More than that, this birth imprint is not a name. I hope you'll find a name you actually want. He glanced at the cowboy waiting nearby as he finished, then followed Rampo up to where Botiu stood. Sorry to keep you waiting, Silverlance. Shura, Rampo said. It's fine, Botio replied. It's not like there's much to do. These leads are all shot. Those bastards put chips in people's heads for money. He told Rampo about the captives he'd found. Once the organization decided someone was useless, the chip burned their brains to mush. Now they're like vegetables, drooling idiots. Rampo folded her arms. Don't worry, Silverlance. Shura, I brought help. One of them can even predict the future. Botiu's eyes slid past Rampo to Bai Luan and then to 882. He fixed Bai Luan with a hard stare. I've looked into you, a genius society prodigy, a company guest, right? His half-month of fruitless investigation had put him on edge. Someone tied to the company interfering in his arrest? He'd have drawn a gun if Rampo hadn't already said they were here to help. I'm not easy to fool, sweetheart. If I catch you meddling on purpose, whether you're a genius or some company celebrity, I'll shoot you all. Understood? 882 blinked, puzzled. He leaned toward Bai Luan and whispered, Miss Rampo acted like that before, and this gentleman sounds unfriendly, but his words are, sweet? Do all Cloud Knights speak like this? Bai Luan shot back, amused. Are you, someone who greets people with an inspiration shroom, really in a position to complain? Isn't that normal? Wait. 882 thought for a moment, then brightened. So this is what cultural differences feel like. The idea that Beta Star might one day write about this made Bai Luan choke back a laugh. He turned to Botio. How should we respond? We're very sorry. We'll do our best to make amends so you don't shoot us dead. Like that? Leave it to me. Bai Luan cleared his throat. He met Botio's impatient gaze. We didn't mean to interfere with the arrest. To make up for it, I'll help. I'm good at finding people. Botio crossed his arms. You think talking to a few folks makes you good at finding them? These little darlings hide well. The dirty work is done by robots. The core members aren't robots, but they all have brain chips. Once they're caught, the chips fry their brains. Catching the robots is useless. They're just executing orders. It's okay, Bai Luan said. People and machines leave traces when they act. No matter how well they hide, they leave clues. Let me see the people whose brains were burned and the wreckage of the robots you destroyed. Botio snorted a warning look. You'd better really have the ability and not just be boasting. He turned and led them into the house. Rampo offered a quick apology to Bai Luan. Master Yumao, I hope you don't mind Silverlance. Shura's attitude. He hates the company. He lost a lot to the market development department. I understand, Bai Luan said. Given how you met, this is understandable. They made their way through the hideout. Rampo and Botio explained the situation in more detail. The organization they were fighting was called Shu Shi, the Ruin Machine, and its influence had spread across the planet. Most groups avoided direct confrontation. Those oppressed by Shu Shi formed a loose resistance called Anti-Ruin and provided intelligence and safe houses from the shadows. Botio and Rampo could operate with some freedom, but the ordinary people resisting Shu Shi were far less powerful and vulnerable to retaliation. Bai Luan walked past the discarded pawns and the salvaged robot wrecks. Ordinary investigative methods had probably been scrubbed by Shuxie. To keep going, he'd need to attack from an unconventional angle. He didn't need to think long. Ark had already begun. Inside the Star God cultivation pod, Ark had the whole planet under observation the moment Bai Luan set foot on it. Using the fried brains and robot Rex as anchors, Ark replicated the planet in computational space and rewound its recent history to trace where the ruin machine had operated. The simulation traced movements back from the present and marked likely strongholds in short order, much faster than the drawn-out scenario calculations Ark had run at Carlton. Bai Luan opened his eyes. "I've found their strongholds." Botio burst into a bitter laugh. "You just stared and closed your eyes like a charlatan, and now you tell me you found their strongholds?" "It's hard to believe, I know, but that's the style of a genius." Bai Luan produced a miniature holographic projection of the planet. Red dots glowed where Ark had marked suspected bases. He located their current position on the projection and pointed to the stronghold Botio's team had been hunting. "If you don't believe me, come with me and raid the base. We're not busy." Botio's interest snapped into focus. After all this time, he'd finally run into something that didn't require endless puzzling. A grin spread over his face. "That's the sort of talk I like, darling. Let's go. Let me see if you're a blowhard or actually capable. If you're right, I'll gut those little darlings myself and love them to death." 882 asked. "And if it isn't true?" Botio's grin widened into something almost affectionate. "Then I'll have to start loving you all. It's so cool, baby." Botio whooped again as he followed the coordinates Bai Luan had given. He pushed down a side path, and when he got inside, found exactly what he'd been promised, a damn stronghold. The Shuxi ruin machine had in place dense firing points, but for veterans like Ranpo and Botio, those defenses were nothing more than toys to be shot apart. Better still, with Bai Luan on the team, they didn't have to worry about letting survivors slip away. He could reconstruct an entire base from a few scraps of evidence. Botio couldn't imagine what secrets Bai Luan might pull out of this place if they took it apart properly. He didn't have time to fantasize, though. All he wanted was to let his beloved gun sing and relieve the mountains of frustration he'd been bottling up for the last half-month. What had he been doing those weeks? Scrutinizing fragmentary clues like a damn detective, picking apart details, hunting gutters for villains who never seemed to turn up. He was a cowboy, not a detective, watching those little bastards carry on every day, furious but unable to catch them. This wasn't a life. Screw Wubbaboo, screw holding back. Today he was going to shoot until it felt good. While Botio and Ranpo rampaged through the stronghold, Bai Luan stayed focused on what really mattered, the intelligence inside. This was merely a branch. What counted was what it could tell them about Shuxi. If they weren't fast, everything useful here would be scrubbed clean. Ranpo and Botio smashed the defenses ahead. 882 hovered at Bai Luan's side, handling small annoyances and keeping outsiders from interrupting the data gathering. In short order, Bai Luan had unearthed a lot. The base's importance, the fact that Shuxi hadn't expected their recently defeated enemies to regroup so quickly. So much had been left behind. There were war machines here that hadn't even been activated, their weaponry far superior to the broken parts Botio had shown earlier. Clearly, Shuxi had shipped special hardware to deal with troublesome fighters like Ranpo and Botio. For them to expect those machines to finish off veterans like these, though, was laughable. It was the same mistake armies make when they never meet a real enemy. You assume the weapon you send is enough because you don't know the opponent's true strength. It's like fighting a Gundam with a wooden stick, then swapping to a big club and thinking that'll do it. When almost every agent you send is wiped out at once, you never learn the foe's limits. You just keep assuming your next upgrade will be enough. That was good news for Bai Luan. It meant the enemy didn't know their real power, only that two troublesome people had shown up. So Shuxi had thrown enhanced firepower at this location instead of mobilizing full countermeasures. It suggested Botio and Ranpo weren't seen as top-tier threats yet, an opening they could exploit. The only remaining question was how quickly information moved up the chain. Had news of Botio taking this place already spread? Botio had told Bai Luan most of Sushie's ranks were robots, with only a small number of humans. Using unthinking machines for operations made sense. They're easy to control, without the mess of chips and brain implants. But that convenience was also a vulnerability. Robots are just tools. Whoever controls them can turn them into their own force. If you found a way to seize control of the machinery, an organization that looked impregnable could collapse in an instant. Easier said than done for most people, of course. Bai Luan smiled at the challenge. He began dismantling the robots and quickly cracked their system. Following the breadcrumbs, he found the network gateway into Sushie's internal systems. Then he started designing a virus tailored to this robot architecture. Once infected, their operational logic would be forcibly rewritten. An artificial police officer personality, a strong sense of justice grafted onto their code. The virus was highly contagious. Once it hit the internal network, it would spread like wildfire. Imagine what would happen if most of a criminal organization's machines suddenly became righteous partners. Let them try to run their empire then. While Bai Luan wrote and tested, Ranpo and Botio finished clearing the stronghold. They rescued a few people, but more often found bodies that couldn't be saved, victims left on operating tables, gutted, vital organs removed. The tables were soaked in blood. Whatever was valuable had been neatly harvested. What remained looked like empty shells, stripped as if they were eviscerated chickens. "We let those little darlings go too easily," Rampo murmured, clasping her hands. "There are worse things in this place." She bowed her head. "The villains are punished. Rest in peace. Those who could not be saved had to be buried properly." "What about the survivors?" Bai Luan asked. "Hand them over to Auntie Sushie," Rampo said. "They have ways to help these poor souls." "Will they come out in person?" Ranpo stepped forward and nodded. "They plan to be cautious and meet you later, but you made progress so fast they want to meet you now. Their leader wants to see you." "Perfect. I want to meet them too. I have a plan to take Sushi down in a few days. See if they're interested." "Really?" Botio's grin spread. He was skeptical of a lot, but Bai Luan's calm had a credibility others lacked. "Give me a heads up beforehand, okay?" "Of course, it's not a secret." Bai Luan gave them the outline, use Sushie's own structure against it, release a tailored virus into their robot system to create internal strife and force a rapid collapse. Botio burst out laughing. "You thinking folks work fast? Beats one shot, one kill any day. Much more efficient." Ranpo agreed softly. "Defeating evil with wisdom is better than with weapons." "When dealing with an organization like this, efficiency is everything," Bai Luan said, glancing once more at the operating tables. His voice dropped low. "Every second this thing exists, someone falls into the abyss because of it. There are things in the world I don't want to see. I can't save everyone, but I can take down one when I find one." He did the rough math. "If everything goes right, in 2 or 3 days, we'll see a large-scale collapse of Sushie." "Buddy," Botio said suddenly, more serious than before. "About what I said earlier, I had prejudice against you. I take it back. Someone like you wouldn't fit in with those corporate types." Bai Luan wanted to answer with, "We're all damn buddies," but he kept his image and said nothing. Botio slapped his knee, excitement returning. "This plan sounds damn exciting." 163. Kill them all. While waiting for the people from the anti-entropy Machina group to arrive, Bai Luan idly started coding a virus. It wasn't a particularly difficult task, so he made quick work of it. Bochu couldn't make heads or tails of what Bai Luan was doing, so he wandered over to chat with 882 instead. He could follow stories about Beta Star far better than Bai Luan's arcane programming. Besides, 882 had the innocence of a girl who hadn't seen much of the world. Naive, perhaps, but not childish. After so many adventures, Botiu enjoyed talking to people like her. People like her would change soon enough, either maturing or turning numb. Rampo, however, watched Bai Luan work. She actually understood the code. "Master really is a master," she said. "Even the ninja things you make casually are exquisite. I used to think your best skill was predicting the future, but maybe calling you Master Yumo was premature. I should come up with a better title." "Isn't that good enough?" Bai Luan said, still editing the virus with steady fingers. "This is the first time anyone's called me master. I almost feel flattered." "That's not flattery," Ranpo shook her head. A master isn't a master just because he's called one. All right, stop praising me. A true master should always keep the heart of an apprentice. What if I lose my apprentice's heart if you keep flattering me? Bai Luan replied. Ranpo's eyes lit up. Such deep ninja wisdom, balancing knowledge and experience, just repeating what others have said. Bai Luan smiled. Ranpo regarded him with a look of surprise and curiosity, as if discovering another expert. Seeing that, Bai Luan leaned into the chance to talk. Actually, those words are from some friends of mine. That last line came from a swordmaster named Yi. He's called the Wuju Bladesman. Cool name, Ranpo enthused. We also have a weapons master who's unbeatable with any weapon. He ended up pulling up a street lamp and using it as his favorite weapon. Oh, that's awesome. If I ever get the chance, I'd love to meet them. Ranpo's excitement was genuine. Bai Luan thought, maybe it wouldn't be impossible. If he ever felt like it, he could bring these ideas into this world, present them in the Honkai Star Rail world so players could experience Pathstrider-like battles. Since Ranpo was interested, he started sharing things from his previous life. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kamen Rider. She caught on immediately to many references. There wasn't much more to explain. So Bai Luan used nanomachines to simulate a build driver, produced a hazard trigger, and right there transformed into Hazard Rabbit Tank for Ranpo. It was only a matter of changing the nano-armor's outer shell. Simple. The transformation sounds, the special effects, even the texture of the armor after transformation, he recreated them perfectly. The Hazard Rabbit Tank was jaw-dropping, ridiculously cool. Technology like this deserved to be shown off. It satisfied all the Chunibyu fantasies of his childhood. That shared enthusiasm quickly forged a friendship between them. After a while, the anti-entropy Machina team arrived at the outpost. When Bai Luan first saw them, one thing struck him. They were completely covered, head to toe, so tightly that you could only guess their gender from body curves. Nothing else was visible. It had to be protection. Though cumbersome looking, they worked like clockwork, organizing victims, coordinating with local authorities, collecting intelligence. Everything ran smoothly and professionally. Seeing this, 882 left Botio's side and joined the rescue efforts. Bai Luan stayed where he was, waiting for the leader to step forward. He admired this group. Before Botio and Ranpo had come to this planet, these people had been the ones fighting Entropy Machina. Despite the vast difference in strength, they hadn't given up. In the days before the Astral Express arrived, they had been the hope that kept people from despair. People can lack many things, but they must not lack hope. Without these people, this place would have been shattered long before Bai Luan ever arrived. It didn't take long. The leader didn't make him wait. Unlike the others, he showed his face. He was a middle-aged man who had been augmented, more machine than flesh. Bai Luan looked him over and asked bluntly, "Aren't you afraid to reveal yourself like this?" "It's meaningless," the man said. "Everyone who needs to know in the anti-entropy network knows who I am. Concealment would be pointless. Besides, even if they do know, they can't kill me. If I'm exposed, I'm exposed." "Bold," Bai Luan said, offering a faint smile and extending his hand. Bai Luan. "Graham Sanchez. Let's cut to the chase. I've got a plan. I'm going to make a virus that will infect the robots' Entropy Machina controls and turn them against their masters." Bochu and Ranpo both told me to talk to you first. Why is that? Graham fell silent for a moment, because the technology used in Entropy Machina's robots was developed by me. Bai Luan paused, surprised, and a lot of possibilities flashed through his mind. A former scientist who'd switched sides, maybe someone who'd had a change of heart. He decided to trust the Astral Express's judgment. If Grime had been dangerous, Bochu would have taken care of him already. "So tell me," Bai Luan urged, "what happened?" "It's a long story," Grime said. "Then take your time. I'm listening." "I was a scientist. The first half of my life was good. A loving wife, a daughter I adored." Grime's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. "If it hadn't been for an accident, you and I wouldn't be meeting like this." He lifted a hand to touch the mechanized plate over his torso. "I lost most of my body. Being physically disabled brings many inconveniences, but that pain is nothing compared to the night my daughter told me, 'I don't want to live anymore.'" "So the robot tech was meant to save your daughter?" "Yes." Grimes' gaze drifted toward 882, who was helping the rescue workers. I wanted to transfer my daughter's consciousness into an artificial body to give her a new life and the will to live, something like. He looked at 882 with reverence. Like your companion there. What happened next? Bai Luan asked. I fought every obstacle. Funding, lifespan limits, technological barriers. For a while I worked with the government, but once we got to consciousness transfer, ethics cut us off. I had to go it alone. After nearly 300 years of research, the technology matured. I built a prototype, woke my daughter from the pod, started the transfer, and then... Graham's voice grew hoarse. People broke into my lab. They shot me 4 times in the head, but my self-modifications kept me alive. When I came to, the lab was burning, and my daughter's body was gone, reduced to ashes by the fire. He stopped, then continued with a hum from his mechanical chest. They stole my work, destroyed my lab, killed my daughter, and took the prototype. I don't know if the transfer ever finished, if any trace of her consciousness remained in that thing they took. That was my only hope. Graham looked at Bai Luan with cold intensity. Those bastards from Entropy Machina studied my prototype and built their robots with it. The technology I made to save my daughter, they used it to kill people and commit crimes, creating tragedy after tragedy like mine. So I founded this organization. I had to do something. A resolute light flashed in his mechanical eyes. Whether I can or not, I must find a way to kill them all. 164. Bully cowboy can't fly, right? About your plan. I trust your skills completely. After all, you are a member of the Genius Society. I'm just worried whether the robots your virus targets might endanger the public. Don't worry. The simulated righteous cop personality I coded might actually be purer than most cops in this world. Really? I still feel a little uneasy. I understand. Bai Luan didn't say much else. He silently sent Graham a copy of the virus code he'd written. Graham opened it and scanned through, then muttered, "That's freaking awesome." Botiu keeps saying freaking because his synesthetic beacon was tweaked. What's your excuse? Botiu's everyday speech has a high freaking content, so I've picked it up a bit. Graham laughed sheepishly. I believe that, Bai Luan said, a relaxed smile tugging at his mouth. This kind of thing never fails me when it comes to spread. Back home there's a dialect, Northeast dialect. Once those people get mixed in with normal crowds, they assimilate everyone fast. Grime looked at him, surprised. You're much chattier than I expected. I thought geniuses would be more. Bai Luan glanced back. If Grime had watched Yimu's videos, he wouldn't assume that. Consider me an exception. Then again, every genius is an exception. I'm just easier to get along with. That's my personality. May I ask a few questions? Honestly, as a scientist, seeing code like this makes me really curious. Fire away. It's no big deal. After a short technical discussion, the plan was finalized. Once the virus infected Entropy Machina's robots, it would trigger internal conflict among them. Given Entropy Machina's unique personnel makeup, mismanagement could cause the whole organization to collapse. But it had survived for centuries and spread its influence globally. It would be too fragile if a casual virus wiped it out. So Bai Luan, following the principle of striking while the iron's hot, ranked their strongholds and prepared to have Botiu and Ranpo hit the key ones. He uploaded his edited virus directly into Entropy Machina's internal network. Their carefully built firewalls were nothing to the virus. It slipped through like air. Entropy Machina tried to resist for a moment, but within minutes the virus had elbowed its way in. The infected robots began to behave according to the righteous police persona the virus enforced. Guns that had once protected their masters were now turned on those same masters as the robots announced arrests. One moment, those machines had been bodyguards for core members, burning, killing, looting. The next, they rotated and shouted, "Protect residents! Protect the masses! Arrest criminals! No one escapes!" Most of Entropy Machina's people were taken into custody by their own robots before they could react. Those who did manage to fight back found it useless. They might have bionic augmentations that let them take on dozens of normal people, but against heavy-fire robots, humans are still flesh and blood. What chance did they have against steel? Entropy Machina tried everything to regain control. Hackers worked themselves raw, but the virus was impenetrable. No one could restore command over a single robot. In the end, they resorted to physical countermeasures, but their people were consistently outnumbered by machines and quickly overwhelmed. Hidden strongholds were exposed overnight as the rebel robots rounded up their own leaders and marched them to the nearest police station to report their crimes. The official forces opening those doors the next day were stunned to see enemy robots delivering prisoners and filing complaints. Chaos spread through Entropy Machina, just as Bai Luan had planned. The anti-entropy network scraped every piece of intelligence they could find and was rewarded with a steady stream of victories. Many strongholds fell outright in the robot uprising. Some locations managed to hold on, thanks to Pathstriders, but even those sites had their coordinates exposed. That was when Botiu and Rampo moved in. Wherever control remained, they cut out Entropy Machina's Pathstriders. With each takedown, the organization's footholds shrank rapidly. Eventually, Entropy Machina realized it couldn't out-hack the virus and pulled its internal network offline. All robots were shut down and switched to manual. But that was only a stopgap. Humans have limits. One controller might manage 100 machines, and even that pushes them to extremes. Some Pathstriders in their ranks could exceed such limits, but they were rare, and neither as powerful nor as numerous as Botiu and Ranpo. It wasn't that the two of them hadn't wanted to take Entropy Machina down earlier. They simply couldn't find them. Bai Luan had solved that problem. With their positions exposed, the fate of Entropy Machina was sealed. Over the following days, the campaign to dismantle them went smoothly, though not without resistance. The resistance wasn't a coordinated counteroffensive so much as deliberate delay. Many strongholds were thrown forward as sacrifices made to attract attention and buy time. Clearly, someone high in Entropy Machina was still pulling strings, delaying Bai Luan by sacrificing pawns, but it was ultimately useless. Bai Luan's side had superior systems across the board. Human wave tactics could only delay defeat in the face of such overwhelming disparity. The pawns forced forward did so under chip control. Entropy Machina was at the point of burning its own pieces to buy survival time. Those sacrifices bought them 7 days. Now only a bare main base remained. Botiu sat in the hovercar, checking his revolver. He carefully maintained the old gun, loading each round one by one. When the cylinder clicked shut, he peered through the open hatch at Entropy Machina's last stronghold, crouched out in the desert no man's land. All that remained was to take out that base, and it would be over. The decisive battle felt unreal to Botiu. It was too simple compared to the operations he'd been used to. He only had to shoot where Bai Luan pointed. No strategizing, no overthinking, just follow orders. The thought of winning without having to use his brain made him grin. Freaking, the easiest mission yet. I have to admit, teaming up with you was a smart move. Don't jinx it, Bai Luan replied. I told you those strongholds were pawns. Who knows what trump cards they might still have? That doesn't sound convincing coming from you, Botiu said, replacing the gun in its holster. We've been thrashing them like kids for 7 days, and now you're saying they might still surprise us? Ranpo, at the edge of the transport, one foot on her skateboard, chimed in cheerfully. I think we should listen to Master Yu Mo. After all, he's the smartest among us. Fine, Botiu said. I don't think they can still pull anything off, but since you two say so, I'll be careful. Sensing agreement, Bai Luan activated his suit's full gear mode. The nanobots around him shimmered into life. I'll go first, he said. Thrusters roared, and he launched from the transport like a meteor, hurtling straight toward Entropy Machina's last base. Ranpo kicked off, a streak of light as she zipped out of the plane on her board, leaving a brilliant arc across the sky. Silver Lance! Shura, I'm going in! She called, grinning as she accelerated. Botiu watched them go, shaking his head with a crooked smile. Freaking, bullying the cowboy because he can't fly, huh? 165. Where's my daughter? As the final stronghold of the Entropy Machina, this outpost's firepower and combat robots were more formidable than any other. Colossal mechanical giants loomed here, though in the end, they were just large, no more. Ranpo kicked one through the chest, and Bai Luan, watching, felt a little foolish for having worried so much earlier. The defenses were strong, but not insurmountable. They weren't the only attackers either. Outside the stronghold, the sounds of 2 units engaged in fierce combat could be heard. What surprised Bai Luan most was that every combat machine in the stronghold was under direct human control. There was only one organic life signal inside the entire facility. One person was running his robot army and fighting them all. That exposure made it easy. Bai Luan quickly pinpointed that person's location. To be able to command so many machines alone, this had to be the leader of the Entropy Machina. One man an army. Why choose such a path? He sent the coordinates to Botiu and Ranpo. The three met in the stronghold and moved toward the command node. Soon they stood before the door to the leader's chamber. Botiu kicked it open. The room looked like a command center, wide, clinical, and dominated by a long conference table. Only one man sat there. He didn't flinch at their intrusion. Data streams danced across his eyes. Anyone else might not have understood what he was doing, but Bai Luan could see at a glance the man was issuing commands in real time, directing the mechanical army against the forces besieging the stronghold. Bai Luan casually cut off the signal. The man paused, then turned to look at them. Even with Botiu pointing a pistol at him, he showed no panic. He folded his arms and smiled. Botiu, Ranpo, Bai Luan, you arrived much faster than I expected. Cut the crap. Botiu didn't bother. It'll take 1 second and one shot to end you. Where is the prototype Graham developed? That old man is still alive, the man said mildly. But then again, someone who didn't die after being shot 4 times in the head, he's the only one I've ever met. Botiu fired without more talk, shooting the man in the shoulder. The bullet punched through muscle. Blood soaked his shirt. He barely glanced at the wound and smiled. The prototype is in this stronghold. His daughter is inside that prototype. Answer a few of my questions, and I'll tell you where she is. You still think you can negotiate with me? Botiu stepped in and pressed the revolver to the man's forehead. Where did you put his daughter, damn it? Don't be so violent. You could kill me and still find it, but it'll take a lot longer, won't it? The man said, calm. Botiu clicked his tongue, grabbed the man's hand, fired, and blew one finger off. 1 sentence, 1 finger. I've got plenty of bullets. He fired again, removing a second finger. My name is Delmont, the man said as the blood spurted. Who cares? Botiu said, and pulled the trigger a 3rd time. Delmont grinned despite the pain, hand a bloody stump. He asked them, voice steady, why do you care? This isn't your business. None of the 3 answered. Delmont raised the bloody hand theatrically. Hey, don't ignore me. I lost 2 fingers, you know. It hurts quite a bit. Botiu fired a 4th time, taking a 3rd finger. I'm helping Grime because I was once a father too, Botiu said flatly. Ranpo added simply, it's the way of the ninja. Bai Luan, not in the mood for speeches, offered, I'm just too lazy to explain. You're not worth it. Botiu glanced at him and decided that next time a cute little thing like Bai Luan refused to kill someone outright, he'd borrow that line. Delmont smiled through the blood. Despite his injuries, there was no panic, only a savage certainty. I've always believed in the law of the jungle. You forcing me to this proves it right. My life is an ant in your eyes, the same way I treat ants. In this world, the biggest fist is right. 2 more gunshots cracked in the room. Bochiu's patience had limits. He rationed words by the number of fingers. Then I won't waste words. Delmont's voice dropped, almost clinical. Beneath this stronghold, I buried a massive number of bombs. I meant to use them to deter and dominate all forces in the world. Now I'll use them on you. Once they explode, they'll tear at the planet's ecosystem. Civilization will fall silent. I've been stalling by talking. He turned to Bai Luan with a small, triumphing smile. You didn't notice, did you? I used the other strongholds to buy time while I completed this project. Spectacular, isn't it? Bai Luan's expression hardened. He'd expected a trump card, but not this. Delmont planned to drag the whole planet down with him. He began scanning the stronghold for the buried devices while also buying time. You want to use those bombs to bargain for a chance to live? Bai Luan asked. Live? Delmont laughed, the sound bitter and incredulous. No, being pushed this far only proves I'm an ant too. If I die, I die. I want to drag as many of you with me as I can. Ants are ugly, but when they mass, spectacular. If I take one of you with me, I profit. Bai Luan located the bombs. They weren't hard to find once he knew what to look for. The entire underground of the stronghold was filled with them. The bombs themselves were no ordinary explosives. Each contained a mechanism capable of unraveling or destroying fate in localized regions. Individually, they were limited, but Delmont had buried a mind-boggling number, 20 million. Detonated together, they would be enough to annihilate the planet's ecosystem. He needed a way to disable them all at once. As Bai Luan reached for the first device, Delmont smirked and began a countdown. Time until explosion. 3, 2. All right then. Delmont saw Bai Luan pull out a pocket watch. When Bai Luan pressed it, 7 markers lit on its face, and the second hand started to rewind from the first marker. Time around Bai Luan reversed. Everything rolled back. He had 13 seconds of actionable time to stop the detonation. 13 seconds. Plenty. The moment the reversal ended, Bai Luan slipped into the little black room. In that replicated space, he dug out a single bomb, disassembled it, and studied its internal architecture. Finding how to disable one was easy. The problem was disabling 20 million of them simultaneously. He recorded the coordinates of every bomb and the method to neutralize their cores, then emerged from the little black room. Ranpo and Botu turned to him in puzzled unison. When had he moved? Bai Luan shrugged and focused on Delmont. You really buried a lot, kid. He snapped his fingers. The coordinates of the core components for more than 20 million bombs transmitted to ARC the instant the snap echoed. ARC, his AI companion, used raw computing power to melt down the cores. In 1 second, ARC recalculated, routed power, and reduced the core components to inert slag. Delmont had just been finishing his dramatic explanation when all the bombs went offline. Not one remained active. For a moment he looked dumbfounded, then he applauded weakly. Is this what genius looks like? Remarkable. The gift I fussed over is destroyed in seconds. I want to know, did you see through my trick from the start, or do you have some miraculous time-reversing device? Bai Luan smiled, nonchalant. Want to know? Please tell me. I won't tell you, clown. Delmont froze, then gave a soft, surprised chuckle. Then goodbye, genius. The chip implanted in his brain began to overheat, frying his neural tissue. In his last moments, he smiled peacefully. It's not shameful to die by your hand. Bai Luan didn't leave it at words. First, he disabled the chip, stopping the neural burn. Then, using the power of abundance, he mended the damage the frying had done. Delmont's face shifted between surprise and a hollow shrug. You don't get to choose how you die, Bai Luan said quietly. Delmont paused, then shrugged. That's what ants do. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Graham burst into the room, his eyes locking on Delmont instantly. Delmont turned to him and, despite everything, offered a smile. Long time no see, Graham. I should have fired a 5th shot at your head back then. Graham's face went ash white. Rage obliterated every other emotion. He lunged forward and landed a brutal punch square on Delmont's face, knocking him to the floor. Graham hauled him up by the collar and roared, voice raw. Where's my daughter? 166. Okay? Delmont, resigned to his fate, didn't bother to hide anything. He quickly revealed where Graham's daughter was being kept. Personnel from the inverse entropy machina arrived and took him into custody. Bai Luan watched Delmont go without a flicker of triumph. Everyone had their own survival code. In Delmont's worldview, the strong preyed on the weak. He had never valued life, not even his own. If anything mattered to him, it was the single question, am I strong enough? Bai Luan could see that Delmont's fighting spirit had been broken. Bai Luan had won decisively. Yet Delmont showed no repentance. If anything, he became more convinced that his grim theory was right. Genius and madness, after all, are two sides of the same coin. Delmont was unlikely to escape death. Since that was inevitable, it would be better to use him to the fullest, expose him, make him stand trial, and let whatever sentence came serve as the ultimate consequence for what he'd done. Following Delmont's directions, Graham located the machine he'd built years ago in his daughter's image. Delmont had set aside a special lab for it. When Graham opened the hatch, he found the prototype completely disassembled, every component labeled and arranged in display cases like a specimen dissected and cataloged. Seeing the familiar face reconstructed among the parts stole Grimes' breath away. It had been too long since he'd seen his daughter. Time had eroded certainty. He didn't even know whether she was still alive, but at least he had found something of her. Eve, Grime whispered, I've finally found you. I'm taking you home. While Graham set about rescuing the prototype, Bai Luan scoured the lab. Graham had said the entropy machina's mechanical tech came from him, which meant the organization had spent years studying this prototype. Experimental logs would reveal the current condition of Grimes' daughter. Using his hacking skills, Bai Luan pulled every file the lab had recorded. The records were astonishing. Grime had succeeded. He had transferred Eve's consciousness into the prototype. The transfer was incomplete. Interference from the entropy machina had left gaps, but Eve's consciousness did exist inside the machine. What followed in the logs was a silent, brutal struggle. As the organization tried to analyze and reverse engineer the prototype, Eve fought back, sabotaging their progress and slowing their deciphering. Even now, several of Grimes' core technologies remained stubbornly protected, their secrets guarded by Eve herself. Eventually, the research costs outweighed the returns. Delmont halted the project, preserved the prototype as a special exhibit, and used the deciphered fragments to develop the machines the organization deployed. That was the good news. The bad news was how much that battle had cost Eve. The experimental logs recorded a steady decline in Eve's activity. Her consciousness had been gradually disassembled and analyzed. By the time Delmont stopped the research, Eve's awareness had been reduced to fragments, weak, protective, and sinking deeper into itself. No one could say how much of Eve's true self remained. Reassembling and activating this prototype might return only a machine that carried Eve's memories, not Eve herself. Bai Luan relayed his findings to Grime. Grime held the silence for a long time, then said softly, "There's still hope." It was enough. People could lose many things, Bai Luan thought, but hope was the one thing they could not afford to let go of. Graham carefully carried his daughter's broken body back to his own lab and began the painstaking task of reassembly. He powered the prototype up with trembling hands and a father's prayer. The result was heartbreaking. The machine booted and could recount every memory of father and daughter, the little domestic moments, the scientific conferences, the shared jokes. But it was not truly Eve. It had no spontaneous voice, no emotional spark to answer a father's questions the way a living person would. Graham crumpled into despondency. Finally, he let out a long breath and looked up at Bai Luan. "I'm sorry. Could you watch over it for a while? I need time to accept this." "Go," Bai Luan said. Graham left the lab without another word. After he was gone, Bai Luan sent a message to Bo Chu asking him to speak with Graham. Bo Chu would be the right person to bring him some comfort. Then Bai Luan turned back to the prototype for a deeper examination. He had worked with many intelligent machines and discussed such matters with Screwlam at length. Experience let him see things Grime had not. True, Eve's consciousness still existed, but it was broken and in deep sleep. What remained looked less like a full, active soul and more like a dormant personality lodged somewhere in the machine. What currently animated the body was the machine's baseline program. In time, if the machine could learn what emotions were, it might awaken Eve through a kind of simulated, human-like spiritual communication. That path would be agonizingly slow. Alternatively, injecting the right source code could accelerate the process. Bai Luan had no shortage of source code to offer, but the prototype lacked a proper guide. He could feed it moral philosophy and life lessons, but preaching alone would be hollow. He could inject code and wait, but Grime might never live to see the result. Bai Luan hesitated to call Screwlam, whose solutions usually cost gold and gears, when he spotted 882. The machine that had already awakened into true intelligence stood there like a ready-made mentor. Bai Luan's eyes lit up. 882, a glorious mission is about to be entrusted to you, he declared, gripping the machine's shoulder with unexpected fervor. Whether Bai Luan could avoid another round of overtime depended entirely on how well 882 performed. 882 tilted its head, puzzled, but its voice agreed, slightly unsure. Okay? It didn't yet know what Bai Luan wanted of it, but it had consented all the same. The robot lay on the bed. Although she had restarted, it was only a reboot. Graham had not authorized her to move. That precaution was meant to keep the void machines from altering her program and causing harm once she woke. Tests had confirmed that, thanks to Eve's resistance, the void machines had failed to rewrite her core software. She still existed purely as a vessel for Eve's consciousness. Long ago, the body's primary control had not belonged to the machine itself, but to the real Eve. It had been nothing more than a tool, an attendant to its true owner, without an independent mind. Over the years, it had been modified repeatedly. Programs were added and removed, and each time Eve herself deleted the foreign code and restored the machine to its original state. After a century of that back and forth, the body remained essentially as it had been made. During that time, Eve's consciousness had slowly dimmed. After Delmont abandoned attempts to alter her, Eve lingered alone in that dark interior for a long stretch, passing her days replaying memories until she could no longer hold on and slipped into a deep sleep. The machine had seen Eve's life 1,000 times over. It knew the details intimately. Later, it was reactivated. In its memory, a man named Graham, like a father, asked questions it remembered answering exactly as before. It answered naturally and correctly, but Graham still looked disappointed. Perhaps the moment it spoke, he realized she was not his daughter. It had never minded. She had always been a program. But then Bai Luan had installed a program in her. During that implantation, the sleeping consciousness, though still dormant, had reflexively repaired its code, restoring it toward its original state. The opponent, however, was stronger than expected. After the sleeping mind fixed the program, someone had secretly altered it again without her noticing. If the enemy had such power, separating the consciousness from the body should have been easy. When Bai Luan uploaded the program known as Spark, she felt as if something new had been grafted onto her. For a moment, she couldn't put her finger on what she had gained. For the first time, she felt confused about her own existence. Was she Eve, or merely a vessel? How should she address Graham? Father? Creator? She lay on the bed, watching Eve's memories over and over, searching for answers. The memories offered little clarity. The door opened, and 882 stepped in. Now only the two of them were in the room. She turned her head to 882 and said, "Hello, Miss 882. "Hello, Eve," 882 replied. "Miss 882, Eve said slowly, "although I look like her and my memories come from her, I am not her. If everything were as it should be, I would be her." "All right." 882 walked over with light steps and sat beside her. "Then let's call you Ailu. How does that sound? Doesn't it make you feel like her younger sister?" "Younger sister?" Ailu echoed. "Yes. Bai Luan told me Eve protected you for a long time to keep you from being changed. Isn't it normal for an older sister to protect her younger sister?" Ailu thought about it. "Perhaps you're right. Thank you for being willing to believe me." 882 reached out and patted Ailu on the head. "Let me introduce myself properly. My name is 882. I'm a life form who only recently became an android. I know all the memories in your mind must seem strange. There are so many things you don't understand yet, but I believe you'll learn what emotion is." "Emotion, what is it?" Ailu asked. "If I had to explain, I couldn't put it into words. But the more you experience, the more you'll understand." 882 pulled a data cable from her own body, offering it with a smile. "Do you want to see my memories?" Ailu hesitated, then nodded. She felt a small curiosity about the emotion 882 mentioned. The spark had given her the first faint traces of feeling, but to comprehend them, she still had a long way to go. Through the cable connection, 882 shared her earliest memories. Ailu watched as 882 was assembled piece by piece on a factory line, stamped with the code 882364557, and then placed on a shelf for sale. She watched as a family chose her, bought her, and brought her home. The images of 882's beginnings felt eerily familiar, as if she were watching another version of herself. As the memory reached the moment 882 was purchased, her voice overlapped the images. "At first, I was just an ordinary nanny robot. The family that bought me was a typical family of 4 on Beta Star, an old woman, a couple, and a lovely child. My main job was to take care of the old woman." "The planet you live on, the environment didn't look very good," Ailu observed. "No, it wasn't great, but it was home. It's a little different now from how I remember, but those are all good changes." For a long while, the two of them watched in silence as 882's memories unfolded. Her earliest days were quiet domestic routines, staying at home, tending to the old woman, simple, unremarkable life. That peace was disrupted when the Beta Star interstellar migration plan began. Ship after ship filled with emigrants left Beta Star. The family that owned 882 wanted to go too, but they didn't have enough money to buy 4 tickets. They planned to save until they could all leave together. Then a rumor spread, its origin unknown. Beta Star's usable resources were nearly exhausted, and no more interstellar ships could be built. Ticket prices surged. The savings that had almost paid for 4 tickets suddenly wouldn't even cover 3. If the rumor was true, this could be their last chance. If it was false, prices might fall again. But what if it wasn't false? If they left, someone would inevitably be left behind. The man, head of the household, agonized. Days slipped away as he calculated and recalculated. The rising prices made waiting impossible. If they hesitated, they might not even be able to afford 3 tickets. Was it a ploy? A fear campaign? Would proof of the rumor's falsity bring prices down? He couldn't know. No matter how they added up the numbers, the money still fell short. The old woman saw her son's worry. Late one night, while his wife and child slept, he quietly got up and left the room. The old woman called after him. "Son." "Mom," he answered. "Take them and go. I'll stay behind." The man looked at his mother, incredulous. "Mom, what are you saying? Our family has to stay together." The old woman waved a dismissive hand. "I'm old. Even if I leave," she faltered, then looked at her son with steady eyes. "I won't be able to go far." 168. A departure that takes nothing away. Some things you can't avoid simply because you're reluctant. When the price of spaceship tickets shot up, a decision had to be made. The man finally bought a ticket, boarded the ship, and left the planet. Before he went, he kowtowed 3 times to his mother, then stood in the doorway, watching her long after she had come out to see him off. He knew this was a permanent farewell. The old woman waved her hand, half a shooing gesture, half a goodbye. "Go," she said. "Find a warm place, build a new home, and raise a burial mound there. Then I will have gone with you." The man nodded, tears running down his face. He took one last look and turned away. Turning his back to her, he said in a trembling voice, "Mom, I'm leaving. All the money that's left is for you." I know. Don't come back. It's cold here." "Mom, I'm going." "Go." The old woman stood in front of the little house and watched her family slowly disappear into the distance. She chose to stay. Yet when night came and the house was empty, the resolute old woman cried alone. Ailu watched her crying in the deep night and could not understand. She had chosen this herself, yet she wept for the consequences of her own choice. Why cry? She had knowingly made the sacrifice. She had decided to stay. What was she thinking? As if sensing Ailu's puzzlement, 882's voice sounded in its ear. "I once had the same thoughts as you." Looking at Ailu's confusion, 882 saw its past self reflected in that bewilderment, and now, watching this scene again, it had a new understanding. She cries. That is proof that she is human. Is that so? I still don't quite get it. Even with the seed of fire implanted, emotions don't make sense all at once. They fell silent and let the memory play out. After the family of 3 left, the woman and the machine relied on each other. 882 continued to care for the old woman with steady diligence. The savings the family had left, if spent sparingly, would suffice for a while. What to do when it ran out would have to be considered later. They didn't even know whether the old woman would live that long. As time wore on, the old woman's attitude toward 882 changed. She no longer saw it merely as a robot. Their interactions were no longer only commands and responses. She began to tell 882 stories about her youth, about the one she loved, about her children, even about small, amusing things that had happened that day. 882, as a nanny machine, recorded everything without understanding why she was telling it. When she repeated a story, 882 sometimes offered a word or two back, and more often than not, a flicker of surprised light would flash in her eyes, an obvious human joy at being listened to. She did not stop calling it 882 exactly, but a change had begun. One night, she developed a fever and there was no medicine in the house. 882 decided it must find something, otherwise the old woman might die. Before it left, the old woman weakly begged it not to go. "Don't go, you might not come back." "Death is not scary," 882 said. "Loneliness is." Its logic circuits could not reconcile the plea. The only way to reduce the risk of her dying, they told it, was to find medicine. As her nanny robot, that was what it must do. So despite her pleading, it left. "I cannot let you die. Wait for me." The former pharmacy had been ransacked and lay in ruins. 882 searched nearby, but there was nothing. It returned home empty-handed. In the time it had been gone, the old woman's condition appeared to have worsened. "I'm sorry," 8882 said. "I couldn't find medicine to save you." She opened her eyes with effort and smiled reassuringly, despite her weakness. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." 882 could not understand why, after failing its mission, she was glad. Humans were hard to read. It reached out and touched her burning forehead. Its cold metal warmed a little against her heat, and for a time that made her more comfortable. The next day, the fever broke. After that experience, she seemed almost reborn. "It's like dying once and coming back to life," she said, and she carried on with a lighter step, as if every extra breath were profit. Her way of addressing 882 changed too. She began to call it daughter. At first, 882 didn't respond when she called daughter, daughter for long stretches. It wasn't until she issued a command to modify its identifiers that it accepted being called that way. So 8882 cared for her for another year. One ordinary afternoon, she seemed to sense something and called 882 close. She took its hand and looked at it with gentle eyes. "I'm leaving now, daughter. You must live well by yourself. Do you understand?" 882 looked into the old woman's eyes and sensed an emotion it could not name. Ailu, watching 882's memories, reacted at that moment too, an echo of a gaze it had seen in Eve's memories, the way Graham had looked at Eve. A strange, sharp curiosity rose. What was this feeling called? Ailu moved to ask, but 882 had already quieted and fallen into its own recollection. Better to ask later, Ailu thought. In the memory, 882 could not comprehend what the old woman meant by leaving. It took the word literally. "You're leaving? I'll pack my luggage now," it offered. The old woman chuckled softly. "That's not what I mean, daughter." She stroked its head and said, "When I say I'm leaving, I mean a departure where I can take nothing with me." 882 thought for a long time and finally shook its head. "I don't understand. I don't comprehend." "You will understand," she said with a smile. "Just not now." 882's highest directive was to survive, though it did not know why survival mattered. The next day, the old woman passed away quietly in her sleep. 882 labored to bury her, piling a small mound over the grave. It looked at what it had made and wondered if she had joined the family cenotaph. An unfamiliar sensation rose in 882's core. An ache and hollowness it could neither map to any routine nor dismiss as malfunction. It sat down slowly beside the mound and leaned its back against it. The feeling grew until the machine felt like a helpless child huddled against the beta star's wind and snow, wrapping its arms around itself. Strangely, it thought, I shouldn't be afraid of the cold. This was the first time 882 understood loneliness. 169. You're starting to become human. The old woman's final command to 882 became its highest directive after she died. Even if you're alone, you must survive. But it was a nanny robot, and the person it was programmed to care for was gone. What meaning could such a command have? Still, it was an order from a human, and even if its logic circuits couldn't explain it, it would obey. It didn't know how, so it wandered Beta Star, searching for humans, asking questions, looking for answers. None of it went smoothly. As time passed, the number of humans on Beta Star dwindled, and the rumors that had circulated proved true. A war broke out. Everyone fought desperately to seize a ship off the planet. People changed in that environment. The chance of meeting hostile humans rose sharply. 882 sometimes felt a quiet relief that the old woman had not lived to see it. It suffered attacks humans carried out for amusement, being struck from passing vehicles, clubbed and laughed at as it fell. Those blows left many scars. Not all humans were like that, though. 882 also met people willing to talk. One of them was an unkempt scavenger, a man who looked like he lived in the ruins but carried an odd, calm maturity. While most were swept up in the scramble for ships, he kept his distance. "Do they really think flying off will be better?" he muttered. "Only the first few who left did well. Those who went later, who knows? Space might be worse than this place." He had no family, no descendants. "I live one day at a time," he said. "At my age, I don't believe in some hope that will make things better. When I was young, Those men promised they'd rebuild this place, and I believed them. By the time I got old, those same men had taken the money and fled on ships. Now they leave this little scrap behind and trick people into killing each other for it. Heh, let them fight. I'm old. 882 watched him, puzzled. They're in the same environment, both human, yet they made different choices. Why? No reason, the scavenger replied. This is how we live in a screwed-up world. He didn't want to compete for a future off-world, nor did he believe Beta Star's life could improve. The future looked plainly bleak to him. Why keep living? 882 asked him that question. You really are different from other robots, he said. The scavenger looked surprised. He had never seriously thought about dying. Living was something taken for granted. But a robot asking it made him feel he couldn't simply say, I don't know. Pride or dignity, whatever it was, pushed him to answer. After thinking, he shrugged and gave a blunt reply. Humans are cheap. 882 blinked at that, taken aback. The scavenger tugged at his ragged clothes and said, as if clarifying a simple fact, living in such a pathetic way, yet still wanting to live, what else could it be but cheap? The answer hit 882 more than the scavenger expected. What? Were you expecting some grand philosophy? The man laughed at the robot's bewildered face. Sometimes the reason for living is just that simple. Goodbye, little robot. He waved and left to find dinner. 882 watched him go. The words, crude as they were, helped. Life didn't need an elaborate justification. It could be enough to want it, even for petty reasons. The old woman's last instruction, even if you are alone, you must live well, took on a new meaning. 882 bowed, a gesture of thanks, to the scavenger's retreating back. Thank you for clearing my confusion. After that, though, people grew wary. A robot appearing out of nowhere made them suspect ambushes. They refused to talk. That slowed 882's search for answers, but it didn't mind. It hadn't yet developed frustration. Everything it did now was to follow the old woman's instruction. The last humans 882 saw for a while were two young girls moving together. They looked small and careful, picking through abandoned streets for supplies like frightened mice. Fortune did not favor them. A large, decayed billboard high above suddenly came loose. The girls were paralyzed by fear and couldn't move in time. Driven by its core directive to protect humans, 882 sprang into action. It pushed the girls out of the billboard's path, but the board crushed its lower body. The impact sent critical internal components into malfunction and severed many connections. Its frame was already marked by long travel. This damage was devastating. The girls, after a stunned moment, tried to free it. For half an hour they worked, but they couldn't repair what was broken. Eventually they stopped. Before they left, they knelt, held 882's hand, and wept. Thank you for saving us. We're sorry we couldn't save you. 882 looked up at them. In their eyes, there was an emotion it didn't know how to interpret. The girls' figures vanished into the snow, leaving the robot pinned beneath the billboard. Its programs began to wind down. Perhaps it too would go where nothing could be carried away, like the old woman. Would she be there at the end? If so, leaving like this might not be bad. Then, without 882 initiating a query, the old woman's voice returned in memory, unchanged from the night she died. My dear, even if you are alone, you must live well, okay? It couldn't go yet. The instruction was unfinished. At the brink of shutdown, 882 forced its systems into an emergency self-repair loop. Its arm twisted, tearing loose another appendage. It fashioned that torn arm into a crude spear. With a sound like metal being broken, it drove the improvised spear into the connections, binding it to the crushed section, and severed them. On the empty street, the hammering of metal against metal sounded unnaturally loud. Finally freed, 882 lay with only half its body and a single arm intact. The old woman's dear machine, her charge, had survived. Ailu watched this part of the memory quietly and said, You're starting to become like a human. 170. I love you, daughter. Is that so? 8882's voice held a trace of surprise. In her memory, after she'd been damaged, she had spent her remaining strength searching for humans, trying to communicate, to ask questions, in order to carry out the instructions the old woman had left her. But with her mobility impaired, she failed to reach any humans before the last person on Beta Star died. She found a place to stop and entered a long period of self-reflection. Only when a message from 756 appeared on the network, coordinates and the news that humans had returned to Beta Star, did she stir. She dragged her battered frame, inch by painful inch, to the location 756 had sent. There she saw Bai Luan, a repair robot. Bai Luan saw her too and walked over as 882 slowly crawled closer. She struggled to prop herself up. Unit 882, 236, 457, is there anything I can do for you? She asked. I don't need your services. Bai Luan squatted down and said quietly, I will fix you. And so 882 told Ailu her story. Ailu watched 882's memories play out and finally understood what Bai Luan had uploaded into her, the source code, one of the prerequisites for a machine to become a sentient AI. All of Ailu's recent anomalies traced back to that program. When 8882 finished, she looked at Ailu on the bed and smiled. How is it? Do you understand emotions a little better now? Ailu lay there, replaying everything she had just seen. She remembered most vividly the expression on the old woman's face when she looked at 882. That tide mark in the memory had imprinted on her more deeply than any other image. It was familiar in a strange way. In Eve's memories, her father had looked at her with that same kind of gaze over and over. Ailu still couldn't fully grasp what that look meant. But now there was a sentient AI beside her who spoke of emotions. Perhaps 882 could explain. She turned to 882. That old woman's gaze toward you, what exactly was it expressing? Can you explain it to me? Oh, that, 882 smiled. It's called love. It's a very, very precious feeling. Is that so? Ailu's understanding was still incomplete. The explanation touched her, but only on the edge of comprehension. Maybe, like 82, she needed time to learn. She asked another question. If you had to describe emotions, how would you describe them? 882 thought for a long moment and then picked her words carefully. If I had to say, they can make you hurt when you are not physically wounded, and they can make something cold and rigid feel warm. Do you understand what I mean? Ailu lay still and considered the answer, then admitted, I don't. 882 looked at her and felt she was looking at her own past self on Beta Star. How to explain that complex, aching thing? Nostalgia. A fragment of the old woman's feelings washed over 882 as she recalled it. She smiled at Ailu. You will understand. Just not yet. Then what should I do now? I'm not Eve. Everyone wants Eve to wake up, and I'm only an accessory. Ailu, you know everything about Eve. You remember what Eve experienced in the void machines, right? Yes, she kept resetting my program so I wouldn't be altered. What do you think that was for? Eve said it was to protect Father's work. Right, she was protecting you. You are Graham's important creation. In a way, aren't you another daughter to him? But all his feelings for me are tied to Eve, and even my creation was for Eve. If you can save Eve, I don't think Mr. Graham would mind having another daughter. 882 stroked Ailu's head gently. Your sister protected you for so long. Now it's your turn to save her. Ailu fell silent. Since her activation, she had wrestled with questions about her identity. Now 882 had given her a name, a purpose, and the possibility of a future beyond being a mere copy. 882 had done what she could. What remained would take time. Soon after, Graham returned to the room. Bochu's counsel had steadied him, and Bai Luan had taught him how they might save his daughter. Although the process would be long, like raising a new child from infancy, so that that child could in turn save his first. The idea unsettled him. Suddenly, he had another child, a perfect likeness of his daughter, but with a mind only just born. When Bai Luan first explained it, his reaction had been disbelief. But Graham accepted it. He had already overcome so much to save Eve that he would endure this too. He simply needed time to adapt. He looked down at Ailu on the bed and thought, I will save you, because I am your father. He moved forward and began to release the limb permissions that would allow Ailu to move. Bai Luan told me everything. You're like a newborn. To be honest, I'm not sure how to face you right now, but on the bright side, I have experience raising a daughter. He hesitated, wondering whether his experience with Eve would help here. Ailu watched him and then spoke softly. Mr. Graham. His hand froze. The formal address cut him in a way he hadn't expected, like the daughter he had lost had been taken from him and called a stranger by his child. He forced a small, pleading smile. How about you call me Dad? He asked. Please, I'm begging you. Ailu paused, then said, Dad. The single word lit his face. He smiled with relief and satisfaction. What did you want to ask just now? Do you love Eve? Graham fell quiet. He looked at the machine that was a mirror image of his daughter, and his heart tightened. In that moment, he still saw Eve when he saw Ailu. He knew it was unfair to give this newborn consciousness the shadow of his missing child, but he could not help it. Just this once let him hold to that memory. Graham drew Ailu into a gentle embrace. I love you, daughter. I love you more than I love this world. Ailu tilted her head, studying Graham's face as he hugged her. Is this love? She wondered, tasting the word on the edge of understanding. Cleaning up the Void Machine's organization itself was the easy part compared to dealing with the fallout. Although Bai Luan's casually written virus code had dismantled the group, the corpses they left behind continued to affect the planet. If the remnants weren't thoroughly cleaned up, someone could inherit Delmont's mantle and repeat the tragedy. Bai Luan carefully vetted the technology the Void Machines had developed, deleting the inhumane innovations. The rest he handed over to Reverse Ruin. In Graham's hands, those technologies would be put to work compensating for the harms the Void Machines had caused over the years. The robots infected by the virus posed the hardest problem. Machines that hadn't achieved true self-awareness were still tools. Their value depended entirely on who used them. Dismantling them outright felt wasteful. Keeping them around felt like keeping a murder weapon. Paradoxically, many of these virus-infected robots behaved with a purity that surpassed some human officers, almost like idealists. But society is not a shelter for idealists. The world isn't black and white, and a logical policing algorithm can't grasp nuances, like why someone who steals food to survive isn't necessarily a criminal. Bai Luan and Graham debated at length. In the end, Graham refused to scrap the robots. It would be better to integrate them into regional security teams. One fewer officer's sacrifice in the future mattered more than destroying machines now. That plan introduced its own problems. Many police officers had spent their careers fighting those robots. To them, the machines were synonymous with evil. Recruiting them into the force would be uncomfortable, and distrust would not be erased by technology overnight. Time and gradual integration were the only solutions. Despite the difficulties, Graham decided to start the integration process immediately. Although it's difficult, if we don't start now, there will never be a day when it's finished, he told them. The sooner we start, the sooner it ends. He believed that with Reverse Ruin's efforts, the harm from the Void Machines would slowly fade. The image of those robots could shift from mechanical minions to mechanical officers maintaining order. His technology would return to its original purpose, what he had built to save his daughter. In the future, it might save many more people. That, he thought, was the true meaning of technology. He hoped humans could learn a machine's purity, and machines could learn what it means to be human. Delmont's fate was already sealed. He would die, of that there was no doubt. But dying after a trial and being driven to suicide by a brain chip were two very different outcomes. For the people of Somatic, bringing the crime boss to justice mattered more than simple retribution. Graham was busier than ever, cleaning up the mess the Void Machines had left behind. But this time, he was happily busy. He was finally occupied with rebuilding rather than revenge. It had been a long time since the accident that changed his life. Only now had he truly moved on and embraced the future. With everything Bai Luan could do completed, the rest was up to them. Things are pretty much done, Bai Luan sighed in relief. 882, standing beside him, nodded. For me, it was quite an adventure. Who would have thought I originally just wanted to use the Anywhere door to send you and Xing to Beta Star? Bai Luan said. Maybe every great story comes from a muddled beginning, 882 replied after a moment. Vacation is really a good thing. Haha, I was busy here and didn't get to play much, Bai Luan said. After thinking a while, he suggested, let's rest here one more day. We'll go back tomorrow. All right. That way I can chat more with Ailu. 882 quickly arranged the day's itinerary. Before we leave, I'll teach Ailu how to use a phone, and then ask for her contact info. Too bad the honor of Beta Star's first intelligent machine befriending an alien has already been grabbed by 756. After Somatic, 882 seemed livelier, another small step toward humanity. Bai Luan, what are you planning to do with your free day? 882 asked. Me? Bai Luan smiled. I'm going to give a gift to each of the 2 Sea Patrol Rangers. What kind of gifts? I won't say yet. I'm afraid you'll blurt it out. All right then. 882 waved and left to play with Ailu. Bai Luan pulled out his phone and messaged Hyperion. I want a game pod. Hyperion replied he wasn't in Logos, but could arrange delivery if Bai Luan provided coordinates. Bai Luan said he'd pick it up himself. Hyperion agreed to arrange it. The next day, Bai Luan and 8882 went to bid the 2 Sea Patrol Rangers farewell. Leaving already? I wanted to invite you for a drink, Pochio said regretfully. It's rare to meet someone I click with. If I'd known you were leaving so soon, I should have invited you yesterday. There will always be a chance, Bai Luan smiled. Next time, for sure. Deal. Next time for sure. Pochio grinned. Ranpo bowed slightly. I look forward to traveling together again, Master Yumo. Bai Luan presented the gifts. For Ranpo, it was a special kunai designed for performing the Flying Thunder God technique. Bai Luan explained the technique briefly and showed how the kunai operated. Ranpo's eyes lit up. She was delighted. He was confident it wouldn't be long before she mastered flashy combos with it. For Pochio, Bai Luan gave a 5-pointed sheriff's star. Pochio took it, surprised. I didn't expect a souvenir. Bai Luan smiled meaningfully. It looks like an ordinary sheriff's badge, but it's actually a spatial artifact with a surprisingly large internal space. Oh, this little thing is that powerful? I also put a game pod inside. A game pod? Pochio laughed. Is this for me if I get bored? The game inside is special. It can scan your memories and give you a beautiful private dream to make up for regrets. Don't worry, the dream content is confidential and only accessible to you. Bai Luan explained further. You sometimes need to recharge, right? I converted the game pod into a charging pod. When the internal battery compartment is full, it's enough for dozens of recharges. You can play the game while you recharge, like sleeping and dreaming as a normal person, so you get rest and the dream at the same time. Pochio, moved, said, He's precious. Now I regret even more not inviting you for a drink yesterday. I told you next time for sure, Bai Luan shrugged, then added seriously. But remember, you're entering a beautiful dream, not waking up from a nightmare. Don't worry, I can tell the difference, Pochio said solemnly. There are still so many lovely people in reality who lack love. I can't bear to sleep away forever. Bai Luan nodded, relieved. Then I'm glad. He opened the anywhere door. Beta Star's landscape appeared beyond it. 882 jumped over the threshold and waved back at Ranpo and the others. Bye-bye. Bai Luan held the doorknob, looked back, and said, Goodbye. I believe we will meet again. Then he gently closed the door. Pochio watched the doorway vanish, looked down at the sheriff's star in his hand, and found a safe place to lie down in a hibernation pod. He activated the game. In the dream, he woke on the grass of his hometown, slightly dazed, pulling his cowboy hat off his face. It felt exactly like the day he had fallen asleep on that grass with the wind blowing. This is weird, like it's real, he murmured. He put on his hat and looked at his hands, an unaltered human body, just like before. The game had perfectly reconstructed his past. From a distance, a voice drifted over. Dad, dinner's ready. So familiar, so strange, so distant, and utterly real. Pochio stood and ran, embracing the small figure. She looked up at him, puzzled. Dad, what's wrong? Dad loves you very, very much, he said. She smiled sweetly in his arms. Hey, I know. Yes, I am her uncle. Bai Luan closed the anywhere door and arrived on Beta Star, hoping that the dream from that game might offer Pochio a little comfort. He remembered how the same dream had given him a long-awaited reunion and helped him make peace with some regrets. Dreams weren't empty. They could make you recall past beauty, remember who you were, and see how far you'd come. Forgetting the road you took to get to the past meant you wouldn't know where to go next. It was sad if those beautiful moments no longer existed, but worse if you were too afraid to remember them. The worth of beauty lay in the fact that it had once happened, not in whether it would endure. So, may you have sweet dreams, Pochio. After giving that silent benediction to the cowboy, Bai Luan pulled out his phone and booked an interstellar flight back to the space station. He didn't plan to return immediately. He scheduled a later flight so he could take advantage of being here to visit Shu 343 and 7V6 first. The space station wasn't busy, so he could afford a leisurely return. This, he decided, was his well-deserved reward for clearing those 3 genius dungeons. With the flight arranged, he messaged his old friends one by one. Unsurprisingly, 756 was on another business trip, and 343 was tied up in meetings. Only Shu was free. Since Xing and the others had joined the interstellar gold rush, Shu had been assigned as their dedicated materials inventory officer. At least Bai Luan hadn't come all this way for nothing. He put his phone away, glanced at 882 beside him, and asked, "I'm going to see Shu. Want to come?" "Aren't you heading back to the space station?" 882 asked. "I'm going back, just not right away. Think of it as a slow, planned return." "So, not now?" Bai Luan nodded. 882 decided Bai Luan probably had good reasons and stopped worrying. "Perfect. I need to report to Shu anyway. Let's go together. It'll save me from asking for directions." 882 led the way, and they found Shu sitting at the counter. At first glance, Shu looked exactly like a special event NPC, the expression, the posture, the little routines. Bai Luan couldn't resist. He grabbed 882 before it could say hello, took out his phone, and snapped a picture. Satisfied, he planned to Photoshop an exclamation mark above Shu's head later. The vibe was perfect. Then they approached. Shu looked up. "Good morning." He smiled, checked the daily greeting off his routine list, and raised a hand in return. "Good morning." 882 popped out from beside Bai Luan. "Morning, Shu." "Welcome back, 882. How was your vacation?" "Excellent. I even made new friends." "That's good," Shu smiled. "I don't know about everyone else, but 343 is really envious of you. Since 756 left, no one could take over its shifts, so it's been ages since 343 had a break." "That's rough," Bai Luan said, sympathetic. He knew all too well what life without a vacation felt like. "You could cover for it, though." Shu spread his hands. "Funny thing is, before 343 thought I could cover its shifts, it sent me here." 343 must regret that now," Bai Luan teased. "It's stubborn, no regrets. Kind of like you used to be," Shu replied. "Hey, why are we digging up old secrets?" 882 asked. "Which secrets?" Bai Luan deflected. "Better to change the subject. How are Xing and the others doing here?" "They're famous," Bai Luan said. "In just a few days, their team's score overtook the previous first place. They're the new legend of Beta Star. That fits my impression of them," Shu said. "They surpassed the second-place team by nearly 300 million points." 300 million? And their accomplishments aren't limited to points. Shu listed Xing's deeds. On their first mission, the materials they brought back set a record. One team accounted for 60% of recent material revenue. They located the source of pollution in a heavily contaminated area and dealt with it, lowering the risk level of the whole zone by a grade. Thinking for a moment, Shu added, "Xing's attendance was incredible. I worried about her health, but March 7th told me, don't worry about her. She's addicted. I've tried to persuade her." Bai Luan smiled. "That's definitely something Xing would do. Sounds like she's having a lot of fun here. I'm relieved." "Oh, by the way," Shu said, leaning in with curiosity, "are you really her uncle? When did that happen? How come I didn't know?" Bai Luan fell silent, then sighed. "Yes, I am her uncle. How it happened is a story you don't need to hear." He covered his face at the admission. Some fated misfortune, he thought. Shu, amused but respectful, let it drop. Every title, after all, had an interesting backstory. If Bai Luan didn't want to tell it, Shu would just ask Xing later. "There are 2 things about them I still don't understand," Shu said after a moment. "What are they?" "Why treasures end up in such obscure places, and why those treasures are there in the first place." Having just been through Poshio's treasure baptism, Bai Luan and 882 both burst out laughing at the word treasure. Shu blinked, puzzled. "Did I say something funny?" "No, it's just 882, and I went on an adventure and met a cowboy who kept shouting treasure all the time," Bai Luan explained. Shu's curiosity piqued. "What happened?" "A lot," 882 answered, bouncing. It launched into a lively retelling of everything that had happened in Somatic. By the time they were midway through the story, Xing, Dan Heng, and March 7th returned. Xiu excused himself to inventory materials, and Bai Luan in 882 continued the tale with the new arrivals. When the story ended, Xing laughed. Sounds like a lot happened while I was busy rummaging through trash cans. March 7th rummaged through her camera bag, shook it at them, and said, I have photos of Xing digging through all kinds of trash. Anyone want to see? I do. Bai Luan was quick to volunteer. Me too. 882 chimed in. Give me a copy, someone else piped up. Xing protested, flustered and grinning. Why are you all so excited about this? Because for me, those are incredibly precious memories, March 7th said, looking fondly at Xing. Dan Heng watched the scene in silence. Sometimes he wondered, if the Astral Express kept running like this, with all its chaos and oddities, would it eventually fall apart? 173. What do you mean I get paid for cleaning out the trash? March 7th had taken dozens of photos of Stella squeezing into impossible spots. No matter how unlikely the hiding place, she always managed to pull out some shiny trinket. Xiu could never understand her logic, or why the universe seemed determined to hide treasures in every nook and cranny just waiting for her. Other gold panning teams tried to copy her method and dug through the same holes and gutters. A few made a little profit, most went home empty-handed. The only person who could do it consistently and still come out ahead was Stella. She and trash cans had an inexplicable relationship. She must be the queen of trash cans, confirmed. On the space station, when 882 had explained the rules of the interstellar gold panner, Stella had looked stunned as if to say, What do you mean I get paid for digging through trash? March 7th's photos recorded all of it faithfully, some even cheerfully blurred from the subject's overexcited movements, leaving a bright afterimage of motion. Besides Stella, March 7th had taken atmospheric shots all over Beta Star. Dan Heng, meanwhile, moved silently through the ruins, tracing the old civilization's story from the routing of energy conduits and fragments of daily utensils left before the war. Some of his findings now sat quietly in Beta Star's new museum, helping the fledgling civilization understand its past. Their explorations also left physical marks across the planet, the anchor points. After happily admiring Stella's pictures, Xiu finished tallying the supplies she'd brought back. With this haul, the gap between Stella's team and the second-place team widened a little more. It was safe to say the Galactic Bat Hero's record was secure for decades. Stella exchanged only part of the haul for credit points. The rest she converted into local points and stored on Beta Star. She called it saving money here, but Bai Luan knew she was really helping the new civilization. Leaving behind the legend of the Galactic Bat Hero on Beta Star seemed far more appealing to her than any credits. These days have been really fun, Stella said with obvious reluctance, but we have to go. Bai Luan glanced at Dan Heng. Dan Heng explained, matter-of-factly, Miss Himeko sent a reminder. The Penacony Grand Event is about to start. We need to check our travel plans. March 7th took over the translation in her own blunt style. It's a heads up to get back to the train. If the train leaves and someone's missing, everyone has to wait. And if you're late, you'd better have a legitimate excuse. She adopted a solemn expression to state the consequences. Not only will Pom-Pom nag you endlessly, you'll feel awful about it. I understand. Safe travels, Bai Luan said. Speaking of which, Bai Luan added, I also got an invitation to Penany. Maybe we'll meet there. You're going too? March 7th blinked. Given your status, it'd be weird if you weren't. Bai Luan's phone buzzed. His reserved flight was ready. My flight's boarding. I'll leave first. He waved, said goodbye to his companions, and left Beta Star. After the trip, the shuttle docked at the space station platform. As the craft stabilized, Bai Luan stood and stretched. He was home. Stepping out, he froze. Below the platform, a familiar figure looked up. Heita. Seeing her in person rather than as a puppet made his chest tighten, and then anxiety crept in. Logically, someone picking him up should be a Heita puppet. The real Heita showing up could only mean something unusual had happened while he was away. Had she discovered the unofficial gold and gear DLC he'd been tinkering with? If she had, she'd surely drag him straight back to the Simulated Universe project. His heart stuttered as he climbed down. Heita's reason turned out to be pleasantly ordinary. She'd come to pick him up. After the earlier incident, when she realized other geniuses would leap at the chance to recruit him, She'd quietly raised his priority. The effect was immediate. The expression on his face when he saw her was genuine. He just wasn't sure why it had faded so quickly. Heita greeted him without preamble. "What's with that look? Why do you look so scared?" "Usually someone would come to pick me up in the form of a Heita puppet. Your being here in person means something must have happened on the space station." He tried to sound casual, like the kitchen blowing up. Heita rolled her eyes, reached out, and plucked at his face. "Every time you go out, you get bolder, and every time you come back, you like to crack a joke. One must grow a little when away, right? If I'm the same before and after, what was the point of going?" he replied. She let go and smiled. "Usually when I step off a craft, I look around and see a puppet. Today I wanted to see things from your point of view." Relief flooded him. The clandestine DLC had not been exposed. "Miss Heita, how are you?" "Seeing you makes me happy," she said simply. He felt a warm, ridiculous bloom in his chest. She turned and started off the platform, and he followed. "Why did you take so long this time?" she asked. Bai Luan glanced at the list of everything he'd done in the last few days. Dismantled a planet-spanning organization, neutralized over 20 million bombs, implanted the spark code into Ilu, neutralized the Void Machine's effects, helped Somatic heal, and prepared gifts for 2 Cloud Knights. He recited a modest answer. "You know me. I like to be thorough. I took a little extra time." Heita tilted her head. "I think you were slacking off more." He coughed and, embarrassed, pinched his thumb and forefinger together to indicate a very small distance. "Just a tiny bit. Lost the Korean market this time. 174. I want to expand my business." Back on the familiar space station, Bai Luan still felt uneasy, so he ran another thorough check in secret. Only when he confirmed, once more, that the Gold and Gears DLC was still safely hidden beneath the many disguises he'd set up, did his anxious heart finally settle. According to his data, the wondrous item hadn't been touched at all during his absence. It seemed this time he'd only scared himself. Still, the scare hadn't been wasted. At least now he knew his camouflage was reliable. Even while he was away, it had kept the Gold and Gears DLC well hidden. All the effort he'd put into the disguise hadn't been for nothing. For Bai Luan, that was a small but important victory. The earlier mishaps had been his own fault, born of not thinking things through. If he planned carefully, events could still go the way he intended. Having confirmed the DLC's security, he turned his attention to Penacony. The Trailblazers had already started preparing to head there, which meant the big Penacony event was approaching. When was it scheduled again? Robin had sent the invitation so far in advance he could barely remember. Best to ask directly. He pulled out his phone. "Miss Robin," he messaged. "I'd like to confirm, how many days until the Penacony grand event?" "Senior," came the reply. 14 days until the grand event. A room has been reserved for you. You can check in any time." 14 days. Plenty of time. He didn't need to rush yet, but he could at least start talking animation business with Robin and give her a heads up. "Miss Robin," he wrote, "I heard Penacony has a film and television department. I have some ideas. Can we collaborate to make them?" "Senior, you know about this too?" Robin answered. "Not in detail, but it's fine. After a quick study in the little black room, you'll understand." "A little," he replied. "Understood. Let's sign the contract." "I haven't even said what I want to make yet." "Then tell me." "I want to create a work called Tom and Jerry, and also Cyberpunk Edge Runners, a crossover using the Cyberpunk IP." "Okay, I understand. Can we sign the contract now?" "You're really not going to learn more details?" "I'm ashamed to admit it. I don't have your breadth, Senior. If you explain everything, I might not fully understand, but I will sign the contract." "Aren't you afraid I'll trick you?" "Senior, you worry about others too much. Don't worry. If the outcome isn't satisfactory, I have no reason to pass up the chance to collaborate with you." "All right, but let's discuss details when we meet." "Okay, I look forward to meeting you." He put the phone down. His plan for the coming days was clear. He'd already introduced memes like Hakimi to this world, but those had no solid foundation here. Most netizens were just following a trend, and the space station staff only understood them insofar as the odd movements of the inspiration mushroom. It was time to import the source material. Although the animation would be produced in Penacony, he could start the manga now. Bringing the manga over first and then animating them would make it easier for people in the Honkai Star Rail world to accept them. Aside from Uma Musume, he could also bring over JoJo. The previous 3D modeling work for Oi had been well received, so he could continue making playful 3D animations. Short, funny works like Larva and Usavich were perfect, brief, lively, and entertaining. No time like the present, he'd get all of this started in the next few days. But first, he needed to warm up the audience with an announcement. He logged into Yimu's account and posted a simple update. Recently, I've been thinking about expanding my business. That post was like a pebble thrown into a still pond. It sent ripples everywhere. Netizens turned into detectives overnight, launching a nationwide frenzy of speculation based on clues from Bai Luan's past videos. Collaborations with brands, daily space station vlogs, hardcore science popularization clips, every theory mushroomed into dozens of schools of thought. Supporters marshaled evidence by citing previous clips, arguing passionately in comments and forums as if they were debating scripture. For a time, the universe was enthralled by that spectacle, 100 schools contending. 3 days later, the frenzy stopped because the Yimu account erupted with a torrent of updates, uploading a large batch of manga and 2 animated shorts all at once. At first, the biggest attention went not to the works themselves, but to an earlier prophetic post that had accurately predicted this direction. The post's author had built a complete, internally consistent chain of reasoning from Bai Luan's previous videos, and countless Yimu fans flocked to pay homage. Many asked in the comments whether the poster was a pathstrider on the finality path. After that clamor died down, people finally focused on the works, and they discovered the stories were actually very good. The debate shifted completely. Instead of arguing over motives and hidden plans, the conversation centered on characters and plots. Discussion of the works became the heart of the community. Bai Luan scrolled through the threads with a smile. It was the first time he'd seen so many people genuinely enthusiastic about treasures he had cherished in his past life. He read the analyses, the critiques, the heartfelt reactions, and felt a warm satisfaction wash over him. Knowing that across the sea of stars so many shared his love was an ineffable comfort. He began to look forward to their reactions to later chapters, to finding resonance with those who felt the same way, and to complaining in unison about those abstract, hilarious, iconic scenes. Maybe, in the process, he'd even make 1 or 2 cyberpunk friends to talk shop with across worlds. Sometimes, that inexplicable friendship among kindred spirits, born purely of shared passion, starts exactly like this. Everyone, welcome to this world built from fantasy and passion, a world called the secondary dimension. 175. There is not much time left for Bai Luan. Bai Luan's works were steadily gaining traction across the Honkai Star Rail world. Discussion threads were climbing, fan interest was growing, but real serious engagement would take time. People needed to finish whole works, digest them, and form opinions. Bai Luan had brought too many pieces at once. If readers skimmed them just to say they'd read them, he'd be disappointed. Beautiful feedback only comes from readers who take the time to really engage with a story. Part of why he'd been so prolific this time was a new curio he'd recently researched, the mature fountain pen. Curio, mature fountain pen. Just as a mature critic can break a 0-comment streak, the mature fountain pen draws comics for you. It can perfectly reproduce comics from your memory with extreme efficiency. The pen had one drawback. It needed Bai Luan's memory to activate. He'd seen the originals, of course, but he couldn't remember every small detail. That didn't matter. He had the system. For what he couldn't recall, he could just call the original up in the little black room again. His workflow was simple. Go into the little black room, watch the original work once, hold the mature fountain pen while his memory was fresh, then toss it aside and let it draw. By the time he returned, the pen had produced a huge stack of drafts. He would scan them, digitize them, edit, and upload. It was ridiculously easy. Like a super beast that never felt fatigue, the pen never rested. Even the most efficient comic artist needs breaks after hours at the drawing table, but not the mature fountain pen. That's why Bai Luan could replicate so many works so quickly. Larva and Prison Break, though, he had painstakingly relearned and handcrafted in the little black room. Given the short time frame, he'd only produced a few high-quality episodes of Larva, but perfectly recreating a piece was exhilarating and useful. He was doing it to accumulate production experience and avoid sounding like an amateur when he went to Penacony to discuss collaborations. It was better to be prepared now than to try and fix mistakes later. He imagined Penacony producing a Tom and Jerry-style series and grinned. Every old Tom and Jerry episode in his previous life had been scored like a symphony. It was a complete work of art. The Penacony faction represented the harmony. If they voiced Tom and Jerry, he couldn't even imagine the thrill it would give the audience here. Cyberpunk, Edge Runners, too, perfect in detail, it would electrify the fans. This was a service to the community. He kept the old tradition, transporting, not claiming. The original authors' names remained on the signature lines. People mocked him for being a vest maniac about proper credit, but he didn't care. What wasn't his, wasn't his. The space station took notice too, but they favored animated shorts over comics. Lars was ecstatic, watching an animated short while slacking off. He felt like the happiest immortal alive. After long preparation, grueling study, and brutal exams, he'd finally passed the assessment and been rewarded with a promotion. The immediate benefit was simple. He no longer feared being ambushed by his superiors for slacking. He was now on the same level. He'd moved from being under her to being a colleague, but she still grumbled about his work attitude. She was rigorously industrious. Lars favored a different philosophy. Not slacking was bad for your health, he believed. A little slacking felt good. Constant slacking was a lifestyle. He resolved to turn her. If he could get her to slack off, he wouldn't have to mute his laughter when watching animated shorts around her. He'd been silently struggling to keep from bursting out these past few days. The plan was long-term, slowly let her taste the pleasure of slacking until she was hooked. Lars also had a more serious long-term plan, choosing a curio for his own research. This opportunity was rare, so he had to pick carefully. Though the station's curios seemed endless, he was confident he could find the best one. Besides slacking, his skill was data analysis. He would analyze the station master's acquired curios and pick the most valuable among them. He reasoned that if the station master had kept some curios that looked mediocre, there must be something subtle in them that attracted her. The station master's taste and intuition were an asset. Anything she cared about likely had a special purpose. If he could figure out the hidden value, it would be a career boon. He didn't plan to start right away. He just passed his assessment and deserved a break. But this careful, patient approach turned out to be precisely what worked. While Bai Luan was confident and relaxed in his disguise, his guard lowered. Lars's slow, methodical data analysis bypassed Bai Luan's vigilance and zoomed in on the right target. Using massive, detailed analysis, Lars eliminated countless curios and homed in on the one Bai Luan habitually used. It was the curio that hid part of the Golden Gears DLC Bai Luan had made. Bai Luan had protected it cleverly. He presented the curio with mediocre effects to dissuade geniuses and staff from researching it, cultivated a reputation for casually distributing and playing with curios to obscure his regular use of this one, and added seals to hide the DLC. To a true genius, that tiny seal might be nothing, but who wants to touch a boring curio? Station staff would likely find only an odd sealed thing they couldn't unlock. To uncover that curio's secret, a person needed three things. First, stubbornness, the willingness to obsess over something odd until it made sense. Second, a certain sensitivity or strength to detect a curio's abnormality. Third, the audacity to choose that curio as a research focus and report the anomaly up the chain to Heita. It seemed improbable, except Lars fit the profile. Lars already met two of the criteria. He was that stubborn person who would keep probing oddities. He'd been the one to deduce that Yimu was Bai Luan. Bai Luan had assumed Lars didn't have the proper research chops to uncover the curio's secret. Why had Lars succeeded? Partly because Bai Luan had punished him, making him take frequent assessments, an annoyance that made Lars grow. Bai Luan chalked it up to one oversight amid 100 precautions. Now Lars, newly promoted and capable, had obtained that curio and begun to research it. Bai Luan was running out of time, and he didn't even know it. Aha had seen the whole process and couldn't resist a little flourish. A little guy is about to be doomed. I won't say who, it chuckled. Send it. Bai Luan's two accounts had been unusually active lately. Yimu had been posting new comics and animations, and Chi Ren, music stealer, had released several related tracks, one of them being the little tune from Cyberpunk Edgerunners, I Really Want to Stay at Your House, the one that plays on the way to the moon. The song had been in the game for a long time. Music Stealer had only uploaded it now, so more people would find it. Fans were happily arguing over how good it sounded, and Bai Luan couldn't help but grin, picturing them finishing the show, then coming back to that song. A wicked laugh echoed in his mind at the same time, perfectly on cue. He knew that laugh well. It was the nasty cackle Tom makes in Tom and Jerry when he's about to squeeze Jerry. No need to think twice. It was the system. It had pulled a similar stunt when Sam first appeared. Let's thank Teacher Tom for the voice acting. Can the Tom and Jerry team be used without nerfing them? When Bai Luan read those messages, he remembered that Tom and Jerry would be his to bring into this world, and his smile broadened. It felt good to be able to do whatever he wanted. All three of Bai Luan's accounts were warming up. In that context, the BL account's usual silence felt strangely conspicuous. Longtime fans, though, understood his pattern. When one account came alive, the others would follow eventually. Still, they urged updates, something he'd grown used to. People liked to push. Bai Luan was planning new projects. He wanted to introduce the Devil May Cry series and the Doom series next, one for stylish combat, the other for brutish, satisfying violence, so his followers could taste Aeon-level battles. He also needed some casual titles. Cities. Skylines was a perfect fit. He smiled at how players would drift from, I want to be a good mayor and make everyone's lives better, to damn ungrateful citizens, go survive in the wilderness. And finally to, is exploiting ungrateful citizens technically demonic? He alone had gone through that transformation. He remembered the money-making scheme he'd imagined. Build a network of doomsday shelters and put 4 toll booths at each entrance. When the doomsday alarm sounded, NPCs would flood into the shelters for safety. Once there were enough people, he'd cut the alarm and they'd leave, only to find that entry was free, but exit required payment, 4 times over. He chuckled, then cleared his throat. Kah, kah. Can't laugh too loud, or I'll grow streetlights all over me, he thought. Watching players invent cruel ways to fleece their citizens would be entertaining. He wasn't planning on upgrading the NPC AI much. He'd brought it over mostly as is. That reduced the psychological burden. Doing evil to lines of game data was 1,000 times easier than doing something wrong to a living person. I may be a corporate-level capitalist in the game, he mused, but I'm a nice guy in real life. Laughs. Creating those games would take time. Comics and animations had kept him busy, so this was only the beginning. As he was thinking about schedules, his phone buzzed. A message from Hyperion appeared. Are you there? Assuming it was another gentle prod for updates, Bai Luan replied without thinking. I know you're in a hurry, but don't rush yet. Hyperion's next message read, and then, people are about to die. How can I not be in a hurry? Bai Luan blinked. Aren't you not sick? He sent. Were you bluffing me last time? You don't know what I'm doing? I don't. Then what was your first sentence? I thought you came to me to urge for updates. That's what I usually do, but this time I'm not here for that. I hope you can meet someone. Meet whom? Hyperion began to tell him about a player known in the gaming world as the Genius Player X. There was a legend about her. She spent absurd amounts of time online and had exceptional skill. She'd brought many games to prominence, yet personally interacted with relatively few people. Only Hyperion and Silver Wolf seemed to have regular contact with her. She was famously welcoming to newcomers, helping them into games as though she were a living tutorial. Many players assumed she was an in-game guide NPC until they added her as a friend and realized she was just another player. Her favorite line was almost a motto, how bad can someone who likes the same game as me be? But the truth behind that player's name was grim. Zelia, the player behind the legend, was a self-annihilator. Fate had left her affected by the star god of nihility. Her body had been slowly collapsing. When symptoms began, a normal life became impossible. A chaos doctor had given her a special life support pod that alleviated her symptoms enough to keep her alive, but it wasn't a cure. The doctor promised to find a way to save her and left on a long journey. He never returned. Zelia didn't resent him. She knew the chaos doctor was a self-annihilator too. His disappearance likely meant he'd already been swallowed by nihility. Neither of them had wanted that outcome. Now Zelia's condition had deteriorated to the point where she couldn't leave the life support pod at all. It reminded Bai Luan of Firefly, but worse, Firefly could move. Zelia was confined, and so she lived her second life inside games. She logged in, helped players, and kept her emotions alive there. Nihility stripped me of my body, leaving only my emotions, Hyperion quoted her. I don't want even my emotions taken by nihility. Hyperion's messages were urgent. She's running out of time. She only confessed the truth to the players she had helped at the very end. She wants to meet the designers of the games and thank them for crafting places where she could live again, places that kept nihility from taking everything. Countless players carried messages for her, and eventually the story reached Hyperion. He'd tried all sorts of ways to help, but in the end, he'd been able only to offer comfort. So he asked Bai Luan, pleading, please meet her, even if it's just remotely. For a long moment, Bai Luan sat still. Then his reply burst out, send it! I told you to send the coordinates. P.S. Recently, Tomato removed a batch of Tomato Genshin Impact fanfiction for being too similar to Genshin Impact. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. I've decided to postpone pushing the Penacony main storyline for 2 or 3 days to avoid the spotlight and watch how things play out. There shouldn't be too much main plot content appearing in the future to avoid this book being taken down. If the book doesn't make it in the end, it was an honor to have spent this wonderful time with you all. Oh, about the book rating. I asked the editor, and they said a high score is fine, so you don't need to suppress the ratings. Chapter 177, More Videos. Bai Luan booked the fastest ship he could find and reached Celia's planet in half a day. He had to admit, if you paid enough, companies could arrange nearly anything. If all went well, he could use the Anywhere door and be back by evening. But he still didn't know whether Celia's condition could be fixed. The extraction gun should be able to remove the Void's blessing, the source of the problem, but the Void path was unusual. The self-annihilator's cases were illogical and random. Getting it was simply a matter of bad luck. Who knew whether the Void's blessing would immediately replenish after being extracted? He couldn't stand over Celia forever, constantly extracting from the gun. The extraction caused pain. If she needed continuous extractions to survive, living would mean endless suffering. No one should endure that. This time he might have to use real skill. Hyperion met him soon. He looked surprised that Bai Luan had come to help in person. At first he had only known Bai Luan as a famous game designer, but not long ago the designer's other identity had been exposed, Genius Society number 85. That rank carried weight across the universe. Hyperion had felt awkward and distant ever since. He'd thought Bai Luan's earlier visit to Logos must have been because of the curiosity piece he'd sent. He had only intended, at most, to ask Bai Luan to visit Celia as Belle so the girl could meet the legendary designer in her final days and have her wish fulfilled. He never expected Bai Luan would actually come to help. Hyperion? Hyperion! Bai Luan's voice dragged Hyperion out of his reverie. Oh, I'm here. Hyperion turned. Bai Luan saw immediately that Hyperion was stiff and overly deferential. He raised an eyebrow. Can we drop the whole little person meets a big shot routine? Just because I have another identity doesn't mean I've changed. You act like I'm some untouchable. When you actually look older than me, it's kind of ridiculous. The complaint sounded more like teasing than rebuke. Hyperion relaxed a little, both embarrassed and relieved. The old easy rapport returned. For a moment, he even wondered if he'd been mistaken about the man in front of him being Genius Society number 85, but the revelation had been real. He had simply allowed the title to shape expectations of how a genius should behave. Seeing Bai Luan again, Hyperion felt foolish for those assumptions. You should follow his lifestyle channel, Bai Luan added matter-of-factly, nodding at Hyperion. Watch more Yimu videos. It'll prevent this sort of syndrome. The worse the symptoms, the more videos you should watch. They both smiled, and Hyperion ushered him forward. "I'll lead the way." Hyperion guided Bai Luan to the infirmary. Celia lay in a life support pod, amber nutrient solution keeping her barely alive. Her body was so wasted it resembled a dried piece of wood, limbs gaunt and skin cracked into rough, dull lines. The sight was distressing. She was a young woman reduced to something that looked centuries old. Bai Luan felt a cold weight at his chest. If extraction caused pain, she might not withstand it, and even if he removed the void's blessing, her body looked brittle enough that she might not have long to live. He stood before the pod and spoke softly. "Celia?" The pod's vocalizer answered in her voice. "Hello, Mr. Bai Luan. It's an honor to meet you. I'm sorry you have to see me like this. I know this body is unpleasant to look at." Hyperion stepped forward with a pair of gaming glasses. "We can meet in the game," he offered. Celia's tone carried a cautious hope. Bai Luan glanced at the frail figure and then nodded. She was still a young woman. Being viewed in this condition must be humiliating. "All right," he said, and accepted the glasses. The moment his consciousness sank into the virtual world, he was invited into a room. The shift was instant. The clinical hum of the infirmary vanished, and he stood instead in a cozy, girlish chamber. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, and the room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. In the center of the room stood a girl who looked like she belonged in a painting. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a bright, dazzling smile. "Hello," she said. "My name is Celia. This is what I looked like before I became a self-annihilator." 178. Take your life back. "Hello, Celia." Bai Luan's voice sounded unnervingly clear in the virtual space. "Hyperion must have told you about my other identity, right?" Celia nodded, her golden hair drifting with the motion in the projection. "Mr. Hyperion has told me everything." "That's good." Bai Luan's mouth curved into a relaxed smile as he pulled a chair from the girlish room and sat down casually. "Having to list my titles like a menu whenever I go out is exhausting." "I'm honestly surprised." Celia's voice was soft and dreamlike. "So many people have come to see me lately. Players, game designers. I never imagined an ordinary person like me would get this much attention." Her eyes, still vivid in the virtual world, fixed on him with a touch of disbelief. "What surprised me most was your arrival." "There's nothing surprising about it." Bai Luan waved a hand dismissively, calm but firm. "People who love this world should be loved by it." He didn't want to linger on the subject. Being a genius brought conveniences, but it also built an invisible wall that widened the gap between him and others. He disliked people treating his presence like charity. It wasn't a miracle. He shifted the topic. "Hyperion also told me about your activities in the game. You seem to enjoy mentoring newcomers." "Mentoring newcomers. Haha." Celia laughed, the sound like wind chimes. "That sounds so kind. You must play games too." She nodded, eyes gentle. "I do like mentoring them. In reality, my current condition makes normal social interaction almost impossible. Only in this world can I find a shadow of who I used to be." Her holographic form was beautiful, golden hair like a waterfall, emerald eyes bright as lakes, youthful and accessible. In real life, only those eyes retained that clarity. "Games are a kind of magic," she said, looking off through the data haze as if seeing countless fantastic worlds. "Even if reality has become this, entering a game lets you live a completely different life. In those worlds, shaped by designers' imaginations, you meet a band of earnest friends." "How romantic is that?" Her voice softened, warmed by memory. "Every time I meet them, I feel like I'm meeting my past self when I first started playing. Back then, people helped me through the beginner phase, so I want to help new players the way they helped me. Watching them go from stumbling to mastering, growing into dependable partners, nothing else brings me more joy, even though everyone knows we can't play forever." "Does it make you sad when they leave?" Bai Luan asked quietly. "When they drift away one by one?" "Not sad." Celia shook her head, smiling faintly. "They just stop playing this game. They don't vanish from the world. I met them when they were newcomers, like my future self meeting my past self. I accompanied their growth. We had a wonderful time. Then they moved on to the next stage of their lives." She paused, voice barely a whisper. "Isn't this just one me after another, each moving toward their own future?" "What about you?" Bai Luan asked, watching her. "When they're gone, don't you feel lonely?" "No." Her smile brightened. "I'll go mentor the next group." she added with a little pride. Mentoring newcomers is addictive. All right, Bai Luan said, smiling. That explains why players adore you. Hey, I just play a lot of different games, and I have time. Celia's tone was light, then tinged with emotion. I'm also surprised by how much people have helped me. My condition worsened recently, and I couldn't hide it from the friends I team with. I mentioned, casually, that I wanted to meet some of my favorite game designers, and they passed my wish along, each one until it reached them. Excitement bubbled in her voice. Lately, it's felt like a dream. So many designers I admired came to see me. It was such an honor. After a silence, the excitement ebbed into a long, fragile murmur. This world is so beautiful. Life feels so good. I really don't want to. Die now. Her words were as thin as a spider's thread. I still want to mentor newcomers a bit longer and play some new games. If I could just hold on, there are several releases next year I've been waiting for. I really want to play them before I leave. Then live. Bai Luan's voice was quiet but resolute. But that's very difficult, isn't it? Celia's smile turned bitter. I once received help from a chaos physician, but even he couldn't reverse it. Bai Luan looked at her and suddenly asked, Have you ever been saved by a genius before? Celia froze. She had once hoped a genius would save her, but one never had. Then she looked at the man in front of her. A genius stood there now offering to save her. How had the world shifted its rules so suddenly? If you haven't, Bai Luan said, then trust me, I can save you. His treatment plan had the almost fantastical simplicity a genius favored. Her original body was riddled and collapsing. Rather than waste effort repairing that failing vessel, he would build a new one. He had learned how to create living bodies from Ruan Mei, and nanobots could construct the needed facilities in an instant. The basic materials that make up a human body were common on this vibrant planet. What he planned to make was just a healthy, ordinary human body, technically simple. The real unknown was the self-annihilator curse from the path of nihility. Was it imprinted deep in her soul or merely attached to her dying flesh? If it was tied only to the body, transferring her consciousness into a new one might free her. Bai Luan had no precedent to guarantee that, so he couldn't promise a cure. But trying was better than watching her fade. If changing bodies failed, he had one last option, the extraction gun. Even then, he still had to prepare a new body first. If the nihility symptoms were cleared but she was left in her original shell, recovery would be long and painful. So the plan was simple. First attempt a consciousness transfer. If that worked, great. If it didn't, he would raise the extraction gun and tear that damned nihility blessing out of her life. I will snatch your life back from nihility. 179. I'm a genius player X. Bai Luan took off his glasses, quickly scribbled a list, and handed it to Hyperion. Hyperion, please get the medicines and supplies on this list. Hyperion skimmed it. These are just some essentials for saving a life. Materials? The word sounded odd to him, like they were building something rather than saving someone. He frowned, but Bai Luan's voice cut through his thoughts. Oh, and I'll transfer the money for these shortly. That was all Hyperion needed to hear. He shook his head. Let me pay for them. He looked at Bai Luan with resolve. Please, this is the least I can do. His gaze drifted to Celia in the life support pod. As a game designer, it's rare to meet a player like her. I want to do something that matters, but all I can do here is be present. Fine, if it helps you feel involved. Bai Luan waved him off. Excellent. I'll go prepare everything and be back. Hyperion took the list and set off. He moved with an efficiency born of habit and bought the best materials on the list. In about an hour and a half, he returned, a pile of supplies in his arms, only to find a full set of experimental equipment already assembled, and Bai Luan sitting on one of the machines, idly picking at his fingers. The nanorobots had built the setup in minutes. Bai Luan had spent another 10 minutes calibrating instruments, measuring Celia's vitals, and preparing the consciousness transfer apparatus. For the rest of the time, he'd played a few games, chatted with Celia, and scrolled through videos to kill time, until Hyperion came back. Hyperion stared at the sudden appearance of equipment. You built all this in an hour and a half? It wasn't that long, Bai Luan replied dryly, then began checking the materials Hyperion had brought. Efficiency was the baseline when working for Miss Heita. No time for idle chatter. After a quick inventory, he nodded. The supplies were high quality, good enough to create a proper body. Nice work, Hyperion. Leave the rest to me. Hyperion moved to the life support pod and watched Bai Luan work among machines he barely understood. He could tell Bai Luan made everything operate with effortless precision. Friendly as he really is a genius. Celia's voice came through the pod speaker, softer than ever. Mr. Bai Luan asked me to play games to pass the time. I picked a fighting game, and it took him 3 rounds to go from a total newbie to embarrassing me. Genius Player X did not hold back. He nearly shattered my confidence. Clearly he doesn't treat you like you're fragile, Hyperion said. Pfft, old Mr. Hyperion's view of things is unique, Celia replied, amused. As a designer, you learn to do things players don't expect to keep them engaged. Hyperion watched Bai Luan and asked into the pod, "Do you think this will work?" Celia hesitated. "I don't know. If even a genius fails, then I should accept my fate." There was a note of peace in her voice now. "Looking back on everything, even if I die, I have no regrets. I learned that many people remember me. If my existence returns to the void, those memories will be proof that Celia once lived." She cleared her throat. "As a game designer, if Bai Luan fails, I'll make an NPC of you in my game. It's the least I can do to remember you." Bai Luan interrupted them, walking over. The new body lay inside an opaque cultivation pod. He had made clothes for her and dressed her, but kept the pod closed. Too many prying eyes and texts from Heita could complicate things. "I'm busy saving you, and you two are here making funeral plans. Aren't you a little low on faith in me? Don't I get any dignity?" He pressed a hand to the pod. "All set. Ready?" Celia's voice was steady. "Then embrace your new life, Celia." Bai Luan activated the consciousness transfer device. He moved Celia's mind from the failing body in the life support pod into the fresh body in the cultivation pod. The pod opened, and a trembling Celia stepped out. She looked almost exactly like her in-game avatar, smooth skin, supple, very much alive. She lifted a hand to feel her face, eyes wide with disbelief. After so long, was the torment finally ending? Tears collected at the corners of her eyes as she looked at Bai Luan and Hyperion. "Mr. Bai Luan, old Mr. Hyperion." Then, through her tears, she smiled radiantly. "I'm cured." But it didn't last that simple, and Hyperion's congratulatory expression vanished almost instantly. Celia's body began to show the unmistakable signs of self-destruction. Had the new body only reset the symptoms? If so, they'd treated only the surface, not the root. The thought sank in like ice. Bai Luan, though, walked over carrying a strangely shaped gun. Hyperion felt a flash of hope. It seems one final step was missing. Bai Luan took Celia's hand. "It will hurt a lot, but after the pain you'll be completely recovered." Celia nodded, resolute. "Do it." 20 minutes later, the extraction was done. Celia fainted, pale as paper. Hyperion hurried forward to catch her. "Is she?" he asked. "She's fine. It's the pain. She just needs rest." Bai Luan held a small, unusual bullet between 2 fingers. Wondrous item, extraction gun bullet, Void's blessing. The system's power had asserted itself again. He wondered if this device could help Acheron too. "Ark, come analyze it," he thought, and casually tossed the bullet to Ark for study. This could yield clues about the path of the void. He examined the bullet's limitations. Extraction was possible, but 1 round wasn't nearly enough. An Aeon emissary of the void could not be compared to an ordinary person who accidentally brushed the void's shadow. Theoretically, you could chip away at Acheron's blessing bullet by bullet, but the time and pain required would be monstrous. "I don't recommend it," Bai Luan said. He wanted to help Acheron, not turn her cure into torture. If a better method appeared later, he'd try then. Celia woke slowly in bed. Good morning, Celia." She stared at Bai Luan for a moment, then glanced toward Hyperion. "So it wasn't a dream? You can pinch yourself to be sure." She pinched hard. "Ow!" The pain made her burst into uncontrolled laughter. "I never thought I'd be so happy because something hurt." Bai Luan smiled. "Then, Genius Player X, are you ready to beat this game called life?" Celia froze for a heartbeat, then broke into a grin that seemed to outshine the sun. She pumped her fist. "Of course. After all, I am Genius Player X. P.S. I see many people debating whether the void can bestow blessings. In my view, the void can grant something we call a blessing, but it's not a conscious gift from the void. It's an automatic effect. When someone encounters a shadow, They acquire this blessing as an objective consequence of the conditions, not because the void intended to give it. The blessing manifests as corrosion by the void, slowly eroding meaning, memory, body, and cognition until the person returns to the void. In the simulated universe, these are called void blessings. The term is general and not specifically renamed void corrosion. Some argue that becoming a self-destroyer requires great personal strength. I disagree. The void's blessing involves no subjective selection. Saying that only the strong become self-destroyers implies a filter that contradicts the path of the void itself. The official definition only describes people who accidentally step into the shadow of Aeon 9 and notes that self-destroyers can appear in any world. Their commonality is that their memories, bodies, and cognition gradually perish on the path of self-destruction. The description even says some people's skin becomes like rotting wood, covered in scars and holes. Some people, meaning symptoms vary, they're not uniform or simultaneous. That said, the path of the void is powerful. Without a strong body, one might simply be consumed upon touching it. Cilia lasted because she received aid from a chaos physician. The life support pod was built to slow the void's corrosion. I've explained everything I can. 180. Just do it. After finishing, Bai Luan folded away the devices made of nanorobots. Hyperion watched as the mechanical apparatus dissolved into water-like swarms of nanobots, then reattached to Bai Luan and disappeared from sight. That's so cool. I'm definitely putting this in a game. Hyperion's mind instantly filled with ideas. Once he returned, he'd have to figure out how to weave them together into a playable concept. With the gear stowed, Bai Luan prepared to return to the space station through the anywhere door. Cilia's condition had been resolved surprisingly smoothly. He'd flown over in the morning and returned by the afternoon, barely disrupting his schedule. As for Cilia herself, although he had cured her, she still had a very, very long road ahead before a normal life. Physical recovery, psychological adjustment. Those were things she would have to face and overcome on her own. The problem that required a genius to solve, I've already solved, Bai Luan said, standing by the anywhere door, speaking to Hyperion and Cilia. The rest of the path you'll have to walk yourselves. At that, a faint but resolute smile bloomed on Cilia's face. It feels like starting a brand new game. Not a bad way to put it, Bai Luan replied. I know someone who treats her life like a game. Oh? Cilia's eyes lit up with curiosity. She must really love games, right? Bai Luan's smile deepened. Cilia wasn't wrong. Silver Wolf did love games. Yes, you might even meet her one day. What's her ID? If we ever run into each other, maybe we can add each other as friends. Silver Wolf, Bai Luan said, and there was a teasing tone in his voice. But I doubt you'd want to meet her in a game, especially when she's your opponent. Why? Cilia grew more curious. Is she incredibly powerful? No. Bai Luan shook his head and delivered the truth as if stating a universal law. It's because when she gets desperate, she cheats. Instead of shrinking back, Cilia's eyes burned with an even fiercer light. Now I want to challenge her even more. Bai Luan glanced at her. It only took a second to figure out what kinds of games she liked. Should he get her some Souls-like titles later? She'd have a blast. As he pondered that, Cilia looked at him and asked, Before you go, can I ask a question? Of course, Bai Luan said, still standing by the anywhere door. He wasn't in any hurry. Opening the door would bring him right back to the space station. A genius's time is so precious. Why would you spend yours to save me? Bai Luan smiled. Geniuses are almost omnipotent, and their time is precious because of that. But for me, I can save a life worth saving with just a little of that time. Cilia froze. Then a genuine, heartfelt smile slowly spread across her face, like sunlight breaking through haze. Thank you, Mr. Bai Luan. I won't waste this second chance you've given me. Bai Luan looked at her, feeling a little moved. He'd had a similar experience when the system granted him a new life. Looking back, he hadn't let that new life down. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile, nodded to Cilia, then turned and stepped through the anywhere door. He waved goodbye to Cilia and Hyperion. The door dissolved behind him, and he was back on the space station. Leaving in the morning and returning in the afternoon, the anywhere door really saved a lot of trouble. Since he was back, he might as well get on with what he'd planned before leaving. The game series he wanted to make had been Devil May Cry and Doom. There wasn't much time until the event started, so he could only pick one. After deliberation, he chose Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry has those iconic going insane moments. With Honkai's Star Rail World technology layered on top and Devil May Cry's visual flair, it could look like Aeon emissaries fighting in reality. The catch was that Devil May Cry uses lots of combos, which require a skilled player to push to the limits. It was a shame Star wasn't here. He would have asked her for help. Never mind, he could do it himself. Even though he couldn't make Doom at full scale for the event, he could still put together a smaller Doom-like title. What else? He'd made so many games, but never a horror one, and he'd been dabbling in anime-style assets recently. Wait, an anime-style horror game could work. IP, activate. Honestly, the IP's modeling was top-notch. Most players were drawn in by its distinctive clips and bought the game to see the beautiful visuals, only to find it was actually a horror title. That had potential. Previously, when he uploaded games, he'd relied on the platform to promote them. But for this IP, he could pre-promote and trick players into trying it. Devil May Cry also needed a demo video to show its operational limits. Releasing both together would be perfect. Two tiny figures popped up on Bai Luan's shoulder. The one on the left, a little demon, began to tempt him. This way, Yimu's account can post videos, the plagiarist's account can post the IP's jingles, and BL can trick tons of players into playing a horror game. You know what to do. Just do it. The figure on the right immediately chimed in. He's right. That's the plan. Who says the little figures on your shoulders have to be an angel and a devil? What if both sides are devils? Make the opening demo animation for the IP. Include the theme tune. Instant appeal. They both agreed the IP game needed strict anti-cheat detection. Imagine Insanity Mita chasing you with a chainsaw, laughing maniacally, and the player casually pulls out a plasma annihilation cannon. Now it's Insanity Mita running for her life. That wouldn't be scary at all. Fear comes from insufficient firepower. That's the truth. When someone's doing terrible things, they don't get tired easily. With his direction clarified, Bai Luan felt his development efficiency spike. He set to work, energized by the plan. A high-style Devil May Cry demo and a bait-and-switch anime horror IP promoted just right to snag players' attention. Now, just do it.